Chapter 688. At 1 o'clock in the morning. It had been 5 hours since Jean Wan was sent to the emergency room. 5 hours had passed, and the medical staff still hadn't come out. The light in the emergency room had been on for 5 hours, which meant that the emergency treatment was not over, but it also meant that Jean Wan had at least survived these 5 hours. Time passed little by little. Nan Hung had killed some of Atuta's men. After tracking Atuta for several hours, he finally caught him and rushed to the hospital without giving him any time to breathe. When he arrived at the hospital, he saw the empty emergency hall, the medical staff who didn't even dare to speak loudly, and the patients and their families coming and going. He walked further inside and came to the door of the innermost emergency operating room, only to see Mo Jingshin sitting on the bench covered in blood. The blood on Mo Jingshin's shirt and trousers had dried, and the blood on his face and hands had darkened, but he didn't wipe it off at all. The man who always had a sense of propriety and was calm and intelligent was like a lost wanderer at this moment. His eyes were dark and devoid of any expression, as if they could suck people in. He sat there motionlessly, so quiet that it was scary. Nan Hung wanted to say something. After all, it was Jean Wan who was lying in the operating room. But seeing Mo Jingshin like this, he could only stand not far away and frown for a long time without approaching him. "Boss!" Kay came up behind him and said in a low voice, "Mrs. Mo's wound doesn't look good. It's in this part." With that, Kay raised his hand and put it on Nan Hung's spine. "Here." Nan Hung furrowed his brows. "Damn it, Atuta is such a bastard." It was Mrs. Mo who suddenly took the bullet from Mr. Mo. Kay said in a low voice, "Don't mention Atuta and those people in front of him now. Otherwise, if anything happens to Mrs. Mo, I'm afraid Mr. Mo will kill them." "Do you think he hasn't killed them?" Nan Hung said coldly. "Did you forget who gave Dolly the fatal shot in the forehead 3 years ago in Cambodia? At that time, it was also because of Jean Wan that he had broken the oath he had made in front of Elder Mo to not stain his hand with blood. Do you think Atuta will have a good time this time? I'm afraid that even if I'm cut to death by 1,000 cuts, it won't be enough to dispel the hatred in my heart." Kay didn't speak again, but looked worriedly at the light on the emergency room. "Have you informed Cheen's sighting?" "Yes, Dr. Cheen had an operation a few hours ago. After that, he booked a direct flight to Los Angeles. He should arrive tomorrow morning. Also, I also informed Fong Ling." Hearing Fong Ling's name, Nan Hung paused and suddenly glanced at him. Kay hurriedly looked away and didn't speak. If it were any other reason, Fong Ling wouldn't go back to Los Angeles at all, but now Jean Wan's life was at stake. She would definitely come back. Nan Hung turned to look at Mo Jingshin. After a while, he frowned, took out a pack of cigarettes, and turned to walk out of the hospital. He smoked for a long time outside the hospital before returning with the smell of smoke on his body. He saw that Mo Jingshin was still sitting there in the same posture. He walked over and threw half a pack of cigarettes to him. Mo Jingshin didn't take it, and the pack of cigarettes fell to the ground along his blood-stained trousers. Nan Hung looked at him and narrowed his eyes coldly. "I've known you for so many years, and today I finally see you lose your cool. But what's the use of suffering? When the brothers in 11 Base went on missions, they all died one after another. It's said that men shouldn't cry, but how many times have my eyes turned red, and how many times have I hated? But no matter how much I hate, everyone is just flesh and blood. There are no miracles in this world. If you can keep them, you should keep them. If you can't, even if you poke a hole in the sky, they will still leave. We both came back from the gates of hell. Jean Wan was destined to be entangled with you since she fished you out of the Los Angeles River when she was a teenager. Even if her life should have been stable and peaceful, who told her to meet you? I think she has already accepted what she should and shouldn't bear. If she doesn't love you to a certain extent, no one would have the courage to block a bullet. It can be seen that in the years you've been apart, her feelings for you have not diminished. Back then, when you watched Mr. Zam bring her to London, I saw that you were very calm. Now, you, Mo Jingshin, are finally willing to admit that you also feel pain?" Mo Jingshin slowly closed his eyes and still sat there. Nan Hung sat on the opposite bench and looked at the light in the emergency room. After a while, he said, since she can hold on for so long after being sent to the hospital, maybe she can hold on for a little longer, 1 or 2 more days. As long as she can hold on for a certain period of time, she may still be saved. If she is shot in that position, she will be killed with one shot. Maybe she was shot a little bit too far away, but this little bit may be her only chance of survival. At this time, I don't have any words of comfort or coax her, but I believe Jin-won won't leave so easily, and she won't be willing to leave so easily. Mo Jingshin opened his eyes and looked at his hand hanging between his legs with his dark eyes and the blood on it that had darkened a lot. His ears were filled with Jin-won's voice when she spoke with blood in her mouth. Only you will be willing to endure everything for me. Do you think only you can love? Do you think only you can love? These words kept echoing in his mind. Mo Jingshin's brain was buzzing. He slowly raised his hand mechanically and looked at the blood on it. Thank you for loving me, in both my previous and current lives. Thank you for not really giving up on me. Thank you for still wanting me. She could say these words, which showed how careful and uneasy she was in love with him. How afraid she was that he would leave in a fit of anger and never come back for 10 years, and how afraid she would be separated by death as soon as she turned around. On the surface, she looked so tough that she didn't feel anything, but when he pushed her away step by step and told her that he was already dead, just to let her go, the expression on her face was deeply imprinted in his mind, and he couldn't forget it. She had been afraid, but he had pushed her so far away when she was at her most apprehensive and afraid. In order to keep him, she even abandoned her dignity and desperately hugged and held him. But in the end, he still pushed her away. He remembered that when she signed the divorce agreement, she didn't even plan to see him for the last time and directly went to England. He remembered that she fell into his arms with blood in her mouth and said that she never stopped loving him. He remembered that she said in a very low voice that it hurt in his arms. Yes, it hurt. Chapter 689. It was far more than 5 hours. The light in front of the emergency room was on until the next morning. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Qin's sighting, who flew over overnight, arrived, but Jin-won still hadn't come out of the emergency room. How long has she been in there? Qin's sighting had learned about the situation from Kay before he came, so he didn't ask anything. Seeing that the emergency operation was still ongoing, he asked this question. Nan Hung held a cigarette in his hand, but didn't smoke it. He just sat here and waited all night. Then he looked at Qin's sighting and said flatly, "It's been more than 12 hours." Qin's sighting didn't know whether he was relieved or not. He just nodded and said, "When I saved your life in Los Angeles with Dr. Wendell was very skilled in removing bullets from dangerous parts. At that time, I just cooperated with him in the operating room. Now, even without me, I believe Dr. Wendell is able to save Jin-won. After all, it's been so long, and she hasn't given up. Let's wait a little longer. Am I the one in a hurry now?" Nan Hung pointed with his chin in the direction of the stone on the bench outside the emergency room. Qin's sighting looked at Mo Jingshin, walked over, and looked at him condescendingly. Every dog has its day. When Jin-won had a miscarriage, she waited outside aimlessly every day for you to wake up. That kind of anxiety and fear must be similar to this, isn't it? Or more painful than you are now. In just one night, Mo Jingshin's chin was already covered in green stubble. His body was covered in dry blood, and he looked like this. Even Qin's sighting could barely recognize him. After all, Mo Jingshin was his brother. No matter how much Qin's sighting hated him, in this situation, it was useless for him to say anything except to stimulate him and keep him from collapsing. Just then, the light on the door of the emergency room finally turned from red to green. Qin's sighting was most sensitive to the change of light in the emergency room. After all, he knew the meaning of this light too well. He quickly glanced at the light on the door and suddenly said, "She should have survived." Mo Jingshin immediately turned to look at the door of the emergency room. Seeing the color of the light on the door, he got up and walked over quickly. Not long after, the door was opened, and the most skilled doctors of Los Angeles Hospital and Dr. Wendell came out. After more than 12 hours of emergency treatment, the doctors were all tired, but Dr. Wendell was still very energetic and seemed to be in a good mood, which meant that Jinwan didn't die on his operating table. But Jinwan was not pushed out. Only the medical staff in the operating room came out. The moment he saw Mo Jingshun, Dr. Wendell nodded to him politely and saw several acquaintances outside. He immediately took off his medical mask and said in English, "Miss G's bullet has been successfully removed, but the bullet injured the central nervous system of her spine, and she must have suffered some impact injuries before. There's several red swollen and broken skin on her head, and she suffered several cardiac arrests during the operation. It took us a lot of effort to pull her heartbeat back, but it's still very weak. We have transferred her directly from the operating room to the ICU. No one is allowed to approach her except the medical staff. The observation period and critical period will be long. Everything depends on Miss G's own ability to recover. Although the operation is very successful, whether she can survive or not really depends on her, and we can't guarantee it." Dr. Wendell nodded to Mo Jingshin politely and saw several acquaintances outside. He immediately took off his medical mask and said in English, "The bullet has been successfully removed from Miss G's body, but the bullet injured the central nervous system of her spine. Has she been transferred to the ICU?" Mo Jingshin asked, his voice almost hoarse when he spoke. Dr. Wendell nodded. "Her internal organs and spine have been injured by the bullet. She must be transferred directly from here to a sterile environment. Otherwise, her internal organs will be easily infected. Mr. Mo, please rest assured. As long as your wife still has a chance of survival, we will not give up. The most professional doctors will take care of her 24 hours a day." The central nervous system of her head and spine was injured. Qin Siding asked calmly, "Will it affect the functions of her brain, including her brain, thinking, intelligence, etc.?" Dr. Wendell said lightly, "It's not certain yet. We need to observe her after she passes the critical period. Dr. Qin, you should know very well that Miss G was injured in a very dangerous position. It's not easy for her to survive such a long time. As for the rest, we can only observe her slowly." Qin Siding nodded and said no more. "Mr. Mo, I'm going to change my clothes first. It's very uncomfortable to wear this for more than 10 hours in the sterile operating room. I'll tell you more about Miss G's condition after I change my clothes," Wendell said politely and respectfully to Mo Jingshin. After Mo Jingshin silently nodded, he left with the other doctors to change clothes. The lights in the emergency room then went off. Hearing that Jinwan's life was saved, Nan Hung turned to tell Kay about Atuda. Qin Siding stood there with his hands in his trouser pockets and turned to look at Mo Jingshin, who frowned because he didn't see Jinwan come out unscathed. "Just like your car accident, the central nervous system of her spine was injured. Did she save your life?" Mo Jingshin's eyes were distant. He just listened and said nothing. Nan Hung had been waiting for Feng Ling to show up, but she didn't come to the hospital. 11 Base made several calls in a row. They had to go back to deal with Atuda, and they couldn't delay any longer. They had received accurate news that Feng Ling landed in Los Angeles almost at the same time as Qin's sighting this morning, but she didn't show up. Urged by the base again, Nan Hung left. However, less than 5 minutes after Nan Hung left the hospital, a slender figure in a black dress appeared in front of the hospital. Seeing that Nan Hung had left, she entered the hospital. Kay had just received a call and was about to come out when he suddenly saw a woman with shoulder-length hair, dressed very feminine and wearing sunglasses coming in. He didn't pay much attention to her. After all, there were many beautiful women in Los Angeles, and there were many such enchanting and charming women. However, at the moment when he passed by the woman, he suddenly paused and turned stiffly as though he had been struck by lightning. He looked at the back of the woman, who was somewhat strange but could not be more familiar, and said in surprise, "Feng Ling." Chapter 690. Damn it. From the time Feng Ling sneaked into their 11 base at the age of 13 until now, they had been through life and death together. After more than 10 years, even if they later found out that Feng Ling was a F** king woman, they couldn't be more surprised than now. When had he ever seen Feng Ling so feminine? Was she really Feng Ling? 2 years ago, Feng Ling's hair had grown out a little, but it was still neatly trimmed to her ears. Although she looked like a woman, it didn't look so strange. But now her hair was shoulder length. Although it was still black and hadn't been permed or dyed, the length and her simple yet elegant appearance really made Kay's jaw drop. Oh my God! He was used to seeing her like a tomboy. He only knew that her skin was very fair and her facial features were very beautiful. But now he knew that the national treasure of their base was actually so beautiful. Thinking of the time when he went on a mission with her, he had to lie in a dark ditch with her for a whole night because of his injury. Kay swallowed hard. Boss Nanheng really had sharp eyes. He had taken her down long ago. Otherwise, when the brothers in the base saw Feng Ling like this, they would all pounce on her like wolves and tigers. But now, with Boss's name in the way, who the hell dared to touch her? Kay, how is Mrs. M.O.? Has she been saved? Feng Ling only took a look at him. Seeing the surprised expression in Kay's eyes, she didn't explain much and just asked indifferently. Kay finally came back to his senses and was stunned for a few seconds before he said, yes, she was saved, but she was directly sent to the ICU. The bullet was in the spine, and the doctor said it hurt the spinal nerve. In short, it's very dangerous. Although the bullet was successfully removed, I don't know if she can survive. Feng Ling's eyes, which had a greeting smile, suddenly darkened. I see. I'll go to see her. You can't see her. Now, Mr. Mo can't even get close to the ICU. There are several isolation areas outside the sterile ward of this hospital. We can't get close to them, and the brothers here can only guard outside those isolation areas. Feng Ling nodded and did not say more. She turned and walked in. Kay opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he remembered that Boss Nanheng had just left. She didn't show up until he left. Obviously, she didn't want to see him. It seemed that there was no need for him to say this. Otherwise, it would easily provoke her to leave again. For such a long time, Boss Nanheng had already suffered enough. If he saw Feng Ling dressed like this, it was likely that many men would fall in love with her. Boss Nanheng was afraid that he would go crazy. The ICU was separated by several isolation areas. Mo Jingshan was repeatedly provoked and persuaded by Qin's sighting. He reluctantly allowed a nurse to come over and wipe the dried blood off his face and hands with alcohol cotton. He then sat outside the isolation area, which was the closest to the ICU, still as petrified as a statue. I say, even if you sit here and wait, you can only resign yourself to fate and rely on her to support herself. Are you sure you don't want to deal with your appearance and clothes? Seeing Mo Jingshan like this, Qin sighting secretly felt happy for Jinwan at first, but now he sighed softly. Mo Jingshan closed his eyes. It's okay. I'll stay here with her. Qin sighting sat on the same bench and looked at the direction of the ICU, which was so far away that he could barely see it. I trust Dr. Wendell's medical skills. In the whole world, he is the only doctor I can trust. Since he could take out the bullets safely and didn't hurt her, I think he sent her to the sterile ward so cautiously because he wanted to continue treating her. If there was no hope, he wouldn't spend so much effort. You know, Dr. Wendell has a temper. If it's a hopeless patient, he won't even accept her. At this time, the sound of high heels approached. Qin sighting raised his head, took a look, and then withdrew his gaze. Then he paused and jerked his eyes back to look at the person. When he saw Feng Ling's face, Qin sighting raised his eyebrows. Did Nanheng see you like this? Mo Jingshan also glanced in Feng Ling's direction. His gaze was indifferent and emotionless. But it was clear that no one expected Feng Ling to appear here, not to mention that she had completely changed. Feng Ling automatically blocked out the word Nanheng. When she walked over, she took a look inside, looked at Mo Jingshan, and greeted him respectfully as usual. Mr. Mo Jingshan nodded imperceptibly and still didn't speak. He was a man of few words. Ever since Jin Wan was shot, he had become much quieter. Feng Ling turned to Qin, sighting, and nodded. Dr. Qin. Qin sighting raised his eyebrows and smiled. Very beautiful, Miss Feng. He said the word Miss Feng meaningfully. Obviously, he was teasing her. Feng Ling didn't get angry. She just smiled and nodded at him again. Not only did the handsome young man suddenly become a woman, but she was also so beautiful. When Qin Siding thought of how colorful Nan Heng's face would be if he saw Feng Ling dressed like this, he found it even more amusing. But after all, Jin Wan was still in danger, and he really couldn't laugh. So he just said, "You specially came back for Jin Wan's matter? Except for the brothers in 11 base. You don't have any friends, and Jin Wan is one of them. If it weren't for her, would you have never set foot in Los Angeles again?" Feng Ling smiled frankly. "Why do I have to go back to Los Angeles? You know, after leaving 11 base, I'm no longer a member of their base. When I return to the place where I belong, I'm no longer the Feng Ling I used to be. Indeed, if it weren't for Jin Wan, I wouldn't be standing here anymore. You're really ruthless." Qin Siding sneered. "Are all you women like this? As long as you don't look back, even if a man kneels down to beg you, you won't feel anything?" Feng Ling glanced at him and asked, "Does Dr. Qin look like a man who will kneel to a woman? Or does Nan Heng look like the kind of man who will kneel to a woman?" Qin Siding. Chapter 691. What's going on? Feng Ling asked abruptly when she saw the back of the medical staff in a hurry. Qin Siding's voice was calm. "Do you think people can just sleep in the ICU? They may face cardiac arrest or near death at any time. Jin Wan's life is not easy. This kind of emergency rescue will happen from time to time in the next few days. You have to get used to it." Hearing this, Feng Ling didn't show much expression on her face, but she couldn't help looking inside. She turned back to look at Mo Jingshun, only to see that the man's gaze never left the ICU. His gaze did not move. Half an hour later, the emergency medical staff all came out. They looked relieved, which meant that Jin Wan had survived another crisis. Men often think women are fragile, but in fact, everyone is equal in the face of life. Even women's willpower is stronger than men's in many cases, Feng Ling said. "I learned this when I went to London to accompany Jin Wan for a year. She has a tenacity in her nature that others can't see, so she will definitely hold on." Mo Jingshun glanced out of the window of the ICU and then looked back at Feng Ling. His eyes were dark, but he immediately understood. After 3 days of life-threatening danger, Dr. Wendell walked out of the ICU on the third night, only to see Mo Jingshun, who had barely slept in a hospital for 3 days and hadn't even changed his clothes. After all, they had met many times and known each other for many years. He had never seen Mr. Mo so depressed, ignoring everything and waiting for a woman to wake up. Dr. Wendell said, "Many of Miss G's vital signs have gradually recovered, but she still needs to be observed in the ICU for a few more days. She has survived the critical period. As long as she can maintain this good state, she will be completely saved in a few days." Hearing Dr. Wendell's words, Mo Jingshun's expression, which had been cold for 3 days, finally showed signs of softening. Qin Siding nodded to Dr. Wendell. "Thank you for your hard work. I finally heard good news." Dr. Wendell also smiled. "Yes, Miss G is very tenacious. Every time her heart stopped and she was on the verge of death, she could be saved. After every treatment, I can feel that she consciously wants to wake up. At times like this, willpower is still very important." Qin Siding nodded. Dr. Wendell looked at Mo Jingshun. "Mr. Mo, you'd better clean yourself up. If you continue like this, I'm afraid you won't be able to hold on before Miss G wakes up." Mo Jingshun didn't speak, but looked at Dr. Wendell gratefully. "Thank you." It was almost another day and night without speaking. Even when Mo Jingshun spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Did you hear that? Jin Wan is still holding on. It's rare for you to be dispirited in your life. You haven't shaved or changed your clothes for 3 or 4 days. If Jin Wan sees you like this, she'll probably be scared to death again." Qin Siding said as he walked over and reached out to pull Mo Jingshun up. Perhaps because Mo Jingshun hadn't moved for 3 days and had only eaten a few bites of the food they bought. The moment he was pulled up by Qin Siding, his tall and straight body swayed. Qin Siding hurriedly supported him, frowning. "You've been suffering for 3 days. Can you still hold on?" Before Mo Jingshun spoke, Dr. Wendell received Qin Sighting's gaze and immediately asked two nurses who came over to open the door of the nearest ward and asked Qin Sighting to help Mo Jingshan into rest. Maybe because of the rare good news about Jinwan, Mo Jingshan was no longer so cold and depressed that no one dared to approach him, or maybe only Qin Sighting dared to drag Mo Jingshan away by force. He sent Mo Jingshan to a nearby ward and asked Kay to bring him a change of clothes and other things. He hadn't eaten much for 3 days. Qin Sighting gave him a bottle of glucose, pushed him into the simple bathroom in the ward, and threw a change of clothes into it. It wasn't until Mo Jingshan took a shower, cleaned the stubble around his chin, and changed his clothes that Qin Sighting felt a little comfortable. Tut, how could I forget? I should have taken more photos of you with my cell phone before I let you take a shower. I'll show them to Jinwan when she wakes up. I want her to know that the great Mo Jingshan can have such an unbearable day. Qin Sighting said with a smile, and then said, "You haven't slept for 3 days. You can't stand it at all. You should take a rest, even if it's just a 2-hour nap." Mo Jingshan took a look at him and said coldly, "What did you put in the bottle of glucose you gave me just now?" Qin Sighting smiled. "The drug works so fast. I specially asked Dr. Wendell for the nearest tranquilizer and dissolved it in the glucose. It should take you a while to fall asleep, but you haven't eaten or drunk anything these days. I guess your body's resistance has weakened, so the drug works faster than usual. There's nothing to say. Just go to sleep." Hearing that Qin Sighting dared to add a tranquilizer to the glucose he injected, Mo Jingshan sighed coldly and rubbed between his eyebrows. Qin Sighting had been brothers for so many years, so he knew Mo Jingshan well. He knew the heartache behind Mo Jingshan's indifference. In the end, Mo Jingshan couldn't resist the tranquilizer he got from Dr. Wendell. Seeing that he could finally close his eyes for a while, Qin Sighting got up and went out. Mo Jingshan slept for an entire night. He did not put much tranquilizer in the glucose, but it allowed him to sleep without relying on the drug for most of the time. However, early the next morning, Mo Jingshan opened his eyes and got up to walk out of the ward. Although he didn't see anything strange, he was still keenly aware that the mood of the people outside was not right. What happened? Mo Jingshan's indifferent, handsome face was no longer as dejected as a few days ago, but because of the atmosphere, it was so cold that people didn't dare to look at him. When the people of 11 Base saw Mo Jingshan, their faces all darkened. One of them said, "Last night, some of Atuta's men sneaked into the hospital, kidnapped the medical staff on other floors disguised as medical staff, and took Mrs. Mo away from the ward. The isolation area was too long, and we couldn't get close. When we found them, they had disappeared. Dr. Qin immediately took people to chase them, but there is still no news." Chapter 692. Mo Jingshan went inside in extreme anger. Sure enough, he saw that most of the medical staff were injured, and many of them were suddenly attacked from behind and unconscious while on duty. All the medical equipment in the ICU where Jinwan stayed had been cut off, and there was no one on the bed. It was too far away for non-hospital staff to approach. Qin Sighting was guarding outside after he fell asleep last night. Even if he was here, he wouldn't be able to tell whether those people were real medical staff or other people who had sneaked in. By the time he found out, Jinwan would have been transferred away. Suddenly, Mo Jingshan's cell phone rang. He looked at the screen with cold eyes. It was Qin Sighting's number. The moment he picked up the phone, Qin Sighting said coldly, "I've found them. Our men have surrounded them outside, but Jinwan's life is in their hands. They ask you to go there in person. Their purpose is clear. Even if they can't exchange Jinwan for Atuta, they want to get what they want from you. They are just using the reason of exchanging Atuta as an excuse. In fact, they want to take the opportunity to monopolize her. I'll go there." Mo Jingshan hung up the phone expressionlessly, turned around, and walked out. The large hotel room was silent and deserted. Several Cambodians surrounded the pale woman on the bed. She had not woken up since they stole her out of the ICU a few hours ago. They even wondered if they had stolen a dead person. Could she threaten Mo Jingshan? But after all, they heard that this woman named Jinwan was Mo Jingshan's only weakness. If they took her out of the ICU, she must be a threat to him. Will she die here? One of the shorties looked at the woman on the bed and felt that she looked no different from a dead person. She didn't react at all. Even if she dies, Control will find a way to bring her back intact. Just wait patiently. He will be here soon. We are surrounded by 11 base. Isn't it too dangerous to do this? Brother hasn't been rescued yet. Shall we exchange Brother's life for his? What do you mean exchange? As long as we get what we want from Control, the money will be ours. Big Brother's been in their hands for so many days. Even if he's not dead, he'll be crippled. Even if we save him, he won't be able to protect us. Let's ignore him and do this ourselves. At this time, one of them put his hand between the nose of the woman on the bed. After a while, he said nervously, "She's breathing is very weak. If we steal her out like this, and she dies here, will Control kill us all at once? For example, blow up this building? His woman is in our hands, so the building won't explode. We've already stolen her, so what's there to be afraid of?" Just as they were discussing what to do next, Mo Jingshin had already arrived at Qin Sighting's location. They're up there, and they're threatening you with Mrs. Mo's life. If you don't come in person, they'll throw Mrs. Mo down from the balcony of the top floor. Kay, who had come with Qin Sighting, came over and said, "Mr. Mo, these people aren't very loyal to Atuda, and they've been scheming against him for a long time. In my opinion, it's easier to deal with such mercenary people than those who are too loyal and inflexible. Be careful. We'll follow them." Those people asked Mo Jingshin to go up in person and not to carry a gun. Standing on the quiet and luxurious corridor carpet of the hotel, Mo Jingshin stretched out his arms expressionlessly and allowed the two Cambodians to search him. After making sure he didn't carry a gun, they allowed him to enter the elevator. Until the top floor of the hotel, the man walked out of the elevator. His tall and straight figure emitted a cold aura like a thin blade. He glanced at the room in front of him and the few people guarding outside the door. He walked over with a cold expression. His voice seemed to overflow from his throat, and his tone was cold and mocking. A few traitors who want to occupy the mountain and become kings. Their ambitions are really great. How dare they kidnap my people? The guards outside the room didn't speak English very well and didn't understand Chinese very well. Seeing Mo Jingshin come up alone, they froze for a moment and then quickly put on a cold face and said in Cambodian, "Mr. Control, we're negotiating with you with your woman's life. It's not so easy for you to enter this door. You better think it over. Do you want her life or the underground wealth that you don't even care about? Anyway, you don't want those things. You might as well give them to us." They weren't sure if Mo Jingshin could understand them. When they were hesitating about how to communicate with him, Mo Jingshin said flatly, "Tell your current leader to come out." He was speaking in Cambodian. Those people paused. They had heard from Atuda that Mr. Control was very difficult to deal with, whether in terms of intelligence, means, or other aspects. Many of his accomplices had suffered a lot in the hands of him and 11 Base many years ago, but they didn't expect that he was proficient in so many languages. One of them calmed down and repeated in a threatening tone, "Mr. Control, our current leader was once the most powerful elite under Atuda's command. He said that as long as you give us what we want, he will let your woman go safely." When those people came up to him threateningly, Mo Jingshin took half a step back. It seemed that he was retreating cautiously, but when those people approached him and were about to grab him, he raised his hand and grabbed one of them by the throat, smiling coldly. "You good-for-nothings want to threaten me? If my woman loses even a hair here, I'm afraid the situation will get out of control." "I can't guarantee that I won't kill." Before he could finish his sentence, the atmosphere was so tense that it was about to collapse in the next second. In less than half a second, a few people beside him raised their guns and were about to point at him. However, the man in front of them had a cold look in his eyes. His black eyes flashed, and suddenly his aura was so sharp that it was frightening, so dangerous that it caught them off guard. When they came to themselves, Mo Jingshin's gun had been aimed at one of their eyebrows. The man who was grabbed by the throat suddenly turned pale and looked at the man who was pointing a gun at him. Mo Jingshin took the gun from him so fast that he didn't notice it at all. This man, who was respectfully called Mr. Control in their circle, was the think tank of 11 Base and one of the mysterious bosses behind it, but few people had seen him fight in person. They didn't expect that he was so good at fighting. Mo Jingshin's eyes were cold. Dressed in a black shirt and trousers, he said coldly, "Let him go." Dash. Chapter 693. The man held hostage by Mo Jingshin turned livid and pale. His throat was strangled, and he couldn't speak, nor could he escape. Seeing that the others clearly did not intend to care about this person's life, and only raised their guns to point at Mo Jingshin, their eyes were filled with wariness. However, because they wanted to get what they wanted from him, they could not directly kill him with one shot. In this moment of stalemate, these people were full of hesitation, worry, and panic. Mo Jingshin was the opposite. A string of crystal lamps on the ceiling of the hotel corridor was accurately shot through by a bullet, and various crystal glass lamps were smashed and fell to the ground with a clatter. There were only 2 windows at the ends of the corridor on the left and right sides, and the middle section was plunged into darkness because all the lights went out. The first person to rush out of the door of the safe passage was K, because it was 11 Base's unchanging code to fire a shot after snatching a gun. The moment he heard the gunshot, he rushed out as fast as he could, followed by other base members who quietly climbed to the top floor along the stairs of the safe passage. The light in the corridor was too dim. Before those Cambodians realized what was going on, they were suddenly knocked down, and their guns and everything that could be used as weapons were taken away in an instant. However, everything happened very quietly. Except for the first shot that Mo Jingshin fired, all the subsequent actions were silent. Even those people who were knocked down fell to the ground in an instant and couldn't make sound. The man held by Mo Jingshin was the only one who hadn't been knocked down. After gradually adapting to the dark light, he saw the scene around him and the people of 11 Base. His face changed dramatically, and he immediately wanted to shout to warn those people who were holding Jinwon hostage in the room. Just when he was about to speak, the man holding the gun in front of him was still calm, pointing the muzzle between his eyebrows as if he was not threatened at all. Mo Jingshin's face remained unchanged, and he still said 2 words coldly, "Open the door." The man looked at him and moved his lips, but he didn't dare to make a sound because the gun was pointed at his head. He was about to beg for mercy when the door behind him opened. Although there was no sound after that, their guns were not silenced, and the people inside must have heard the sound when Mo Jingshin fired. It was just that they couldn't guess whether the gun was fired by their men or someone else. After all, if Mo Jingshin could really enter this hotel, he should have been searched and couldn't have brought a gun in. But the people who came out didn't expect that when the door opened, they would see more than 20 people of 11 Base standing in a row in the dark, and all the guns were aimed in the direction of the door. The man's expression changed, and his pupils constricted. Just as he was about to retreat, he stopped in front of the door in fright because of the muzzles of the guns. There was a moment of dead silence in the corridor. From the beginning to the end, Mo Jingshin remained calm and indifferent. The people in front of the door saw Mo Jingshin in the darkness and then saw their brothers lying unconscious on the ground. One of them was being held hostage by Mo Jingshin. They abruptly turned around and rushed back. At the moment when the man moved, Kei took the lead to shoot. With a bang, the man was shot in the shoulder. The people in the room were ready to go, and the leader had already dragged Jinwon up from the bed. At the moment when Kei rushed in with his men, he saw several people carrying Jinwon on their shoulders, standing on the balcony, and pointing their guns at the door. They were few in number and might not have enough bullets, but their biggest trump card was Jinwon. Seeing Jinwon, who hadn't passed the critical period, being carried on their shoulders and left the hospital, they didn't know if she could survive this. Kei glared at them coldly and pointed the gun in his hand at the head of the man who was carrying Jinwon. The Los Angeles police and the members of 11 Base have completely surrounded the hotel. If you don't want to make things worse, let them go immediately. The man behind Kei said, "I'll give you the last 30 seconds. The leader who was carrying Jinwon sneered and suddenly looked back at the balcony, only to see that the Los Angeles rescue team had arrived at the balcony and a huge air cushion as high as 2 stories had been laid down below. Even if they threatened them by throwing this woman down, there was no room for them to threaten them. Even if they jumped down now, even if they didn't die, they would be instantly held down by the people who surrounded them below. The expressions of these people were instantly filled with panic, full of surprise. They had been with the Tuda in war-torn countries for many years, and the rescue teams of those countries would never come to rescue them in time. They were not familiar with Los Angeles, so they usually followed Atuda and listened to his decisions. They didn't expect that when they wanted to do a big job, they would miscalculate so much. Did this Mr. Control know that they would make a mistake? Kit was about to go up, but in a flash, the gun suddenly changed direction and stuck directly to Jean Wan's body. The members of 11 Base were not weak. They were even better trained than many members of the American Special Forces and had excellent martial arts skills. As long as it was a normal fight, they would not be at a disadvantage. But now Mrs. Mo was in the hands of these Cambodians, and more importantly, Mrs. Mo's health was not very good. She had been saved in the hospital, so they couldn't make any mistakes, so they couldn't do their best. But even at this point, the people of 11 Base didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. Just when those people had been cautiously staring at Kay, fearing that they would be threatened and were going to attack them, Mo Jingshin hit the ribs of the man he was holding with a clever force. As the man bent over in pain, Mo Jingshin kicked him forward. Hearing the noise, Kay looked back and saw this scene. At the same time, he raised his foot and kicked the man forward again. This man was too dark, thin, and short. After being kicked twice, he almost flew to the balcony not far away and finally fell heavily at the feet of those people, spitting out blood from his mouth. Chapter 694. Don't come any closer, or we'll kill her now. He wanted her to take her last breath right here. Even if we die, we can take Mr. Control's beloved wife with us. The leader of the men on the balcony pressed the muzzle against Jean Wan's back. As if on purpose, he pressed the muzzle harder and harder on the wound where Jean Wan had just taken out the bullet. Seeing the wound on Jean Wan's shoulder that had almost healed gradually oozed blood again and stained her white hospital gown, Mo Jingshin immediately stopped in his tracks. Kay and the others had already pulled the trigger of their guns. A fight could break out at any time. Looking at the men who had been leaning against the balcony with their backs to the high-rise building of another hotel across the road, Mo Jingshin looked at them coldly and suddenly let out a low, hoarse laugh. A few seconds later, he continued to move forward as if nothing had happened. The leader of the men also tightened his fingers on the trigger and watched Mr. Control come over as if he didn't care about this woman's life at all. Didn't their brother Atuda say that this woman named Jean Wan was Mr. Control's weakness? Why did Mr. Control not seem to care about her when she was injured like this and her life was still in their hands? Was it because this woman couldn't live long? Or did Mr. Control have some other plan? But looking at this man's fearless expression, and even his entire body was filled with cold disdain, it was obvious that it was different from what they had imagined. Just as they cautiously carried Jean Wan to the balcony and leaned against the balcony railing, Mo Jingshin said flatly, "You're courting death." The man's tone was too cold, so cold that they didn't understand what he meant when he suddenly said those words. However, suddenly there was a muffled bang. It was a silencer. Only those who knew how to shoot could distinguish the sudden muffled sound, but none of the people of 11 Base in the room, including Mo Jingshin, fired. It had only been 2 seconds before the man on the balcony realized what had happened. The leader of the men, carrying Jean Wan, had been shot through the back of his head. He stood there stiffly for 2 seconds and then slowly knelt down. Even though he was dead, his eyes were still wide open and he couldn't believe what had happened. Just as those people were frightened by this sudden change, in just 2 seconds, there were a few more bang-bang sounds, and the few people standing on the balcony had their heads exploded in an instant. Seeing those men fall to the ground one by one and die with their eyes wide open in disbelief, Mo Jingshin looked calmly at the top window of the hotel across the road, where a sniper rifle was still standing. Mo Jingshin stepped forward and picked Jean Wan up. Kate immediately led his men to kick those men away, lest the blood flowing from the back of their heads stained Jean Wan's body. Seeing that Jean Wan's complexion was so pale that it was almost colorless, and that the wound on her back was seeping more blood, Mo Jingshin carried her up with a cold expression. Without a moment's delay, he quickly turned to leave. On the opposite side, Feng Ling withdrew the sniper rifle from the window and was about to carry on her back out of habit, but then she realized that she was no longer a member of 11 Base, and it was not convenient for her to take it with her. So she put the rifle aside and looked back deadpan, only to see Qin's sighting, who was looking at her calmly. No wonder when Nan Hung didn't know you were a woman. He often said that although there were many capable people and powerful snipers in 11 Base, only you and Kay could shoot accurately from a distance of 500 meters, especially you. Although you were young and much thinner than others, you were more skillful with the sniper rifle than anyone else and seemed to have infinite explosive power. Today, I finally understand why he praised you so much. Feng Ling said flatly. It should be said that Dr. Qin and Mr. Mo's judgment is very accurate. Those Cambodians know the current situation of 11 Base very well, and know that Kay is the most trusted sniper. As long as Kay breaks into the hotel with them, they will think that 11 Base is in a hurry this time and doesn't prepare an external sniper range. So this diversion is the key to victory. Qin's sighting smiled. You haven't touched a gun for nearly a year, have you? Feng Ling raised her eyebrows lightly. I haven't touched a gun since I left the base, so I'm really out of practice. If it weren't for the fact that the person I'm going to save today is Jean Wan, I wouldn't have taken this risk so easily. If I didn't aim accurately, I would have killed more than her. Since Nan Hung asked me to call you here, of course, I trust your marksmanship. Feng Ling said flatly. Did Nan Hung ask you to call me? Qin's sighting raised his eyebrows with a smile. Of course. Otherwise, why do you think I dare to invite you, Miss Feng? Since he is in Los Angeles, why didn't he come in person? Speaking of marksmanship, Kay and I were both personally trained by him. Isn't he the safest sniper? Feng Ling looked a little unfriendly. What do you think? Feng Ling didn't say anything more. She just put the sniper rifle back into the black rectangular leather case, and then turned to walk out expressionlessly, not intending to stay any longer. Feng Ling, Nan Hung forced you to leave 11 Base for your own good. You grew up in an orphanage and finally found your family, so you should go back to live a peaceful life. Besides, your family won't allow you to live such a dangerous life again. He owes the Feng family a favor, but you're the lost child of the Feng family, so he can't negotiate with the Feng family and can only ask you to go back. Even if it's for your own good, he has to do that. Feng Ling didn't seem to hear his words. She didn't stop but walked out without looking back. However, as soon as she walked out of the door, she suddenly saw a tall and straight figure standing outside. The man was just outside the door, his back against the wall, a cigarette in his hand flickering between his fingers. Because she came out, he looked sideways at her. The man half narrowed his dark eyes in the smoke, stared at her cold face, and then took a deep breath, blowing the smoke on her face. Feng Ling looked coldly at Nan Hung, who had been waiting outside for a long time. Chapter 695. Nan Hung was nearly 1.9 meters tall, and Feng Ling was nearly 1.7 meters tall. The difference between them was about 10 or 20 centimeters. When he looked down at her from above, he could clearly see each of her eyelashes. At this time, because she saw him, her eyelashes seemed to be frozen bit by bit, without any warmth. Even though she had been separated for 10 months and her appearance had been crowned with the shell of the eldest daughter of the Feng family, she was still the same Feng Ling, lonely and indifferent. His heart skipped a beat. It was a little sore and painful, but he couldn't describe the feeling. Nan Hung threw away the cigarette, but in his hand, and stepped on it to extinguish it. Just as he was about to reach out to hold her wrist, she evaded him without leaving a trace. At the same time, she retreated a meter away. Nan Hung looked down at her and said in a low and hoarse voice, I haven't seen you for 10 months. Are you going to avoid me like this? Feng Ling didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes were cold. She gave up taking the elevator and turned to go straight to the safe passage in the other direction. Nan Hung's expression froze for a moment. Then he quickly followed up. Cheen's sighting rushed back to the hospital and entered the emergency room with Dr. Wendell. If it had been any longer, Jean Wan would have died in that hotel. A few hours later, Jean Wan was sent back to the ICU. This time, the hospital learned from their mistake and allowed the people of 11 Base to enter the isolation area. They put on a layer of sterilized coats and guarded outside the ward. Through the glass outside the ward, Mo Jingshin looked at Jean Wan lying motionless inside. All the medical equipment damaged by those people had been replaced with new equipment. She lay there, all white, almost drowned in a pile of medical wires and instruments of various colors beside the bed. No matter how long Mo Jingshin stood there and looked at her, she remained motionless. After participating in the emergency treatment, Cheen Sighting took a shower and changed his clothes. Seeing that Mo Jingshin could finally stand outside the ward and look at Jean Wan, he walked over and said she was seriously injured. Just a few days after the operation, she was tossed out by those people. After disinfecting and retreating the wound, I can see that her signs of life are stable, but she is still very weak. No matter what, I lost her last night. Her life is in my hands. Mo Jingshin's expression didn't change, but when he looked at Jean Wan on the bed, his eyes darkened and his voice was low and slow. Even if I was outside last night, I wouldn't have found what happened inside. After all, the isolation area is too far away and the medical staff are wearing sterilized masks. It has nothing to do with you. Don't take responsibility. Cheen Sighting also looked at Jean Wan. Those people just want to get what they want from you, so they don't dare to do anything to you, but they're cruel to the people around you. However, they can't afford to take Jean Wan's life. Mo Jingshin stared at the motionless woman inside and said indifferently, "No matter who they are, they can't take her life." These words were light and light. Compared to the scene of Mo Jingshin barging into the hotel alone and firing a warning shot in the morning, it appeared much calmer. However, these words carried more weight. "Is Atuta still in Nan Heng's hands?" Mo Jingshin asked. "I asked Kay. He said that he is locked in the base and many people are guarding him, waiting for you to find time to go back and kill him. After all, the person who is injured is Jean Wan. They know that you have to kill this person yourself to vent their hatred. If Jean Wan doesn't wake up, even if we kill him, it won't be enough." Mo Jingshin's eyes were cold. "Where's Nan Heng?" Cheen Sighting didn't answer, but sighed with a smile. "You know, it's rare for Feng Ling to return to Los Angeles because of Jean Wan." Although he didn't answer the question, it was enough to let Mo Jingshin know Nan Heng's current situation. Mo Jingshin didn't speak anymore, but just looked at Jean Wan through the glass. He looked at her pale face, which had lost a lot of weight in just a few days, looked at her eyelashes, which hadn't moved at all, and heard what she said before the accident. She said she wanted to go back to the U Garden. In the dark detention room, someone was cursing from time to time. Sometimes it was in Cambodian, sometimes it was in English, and sometimes it was in Chinese. The curses were all the same. "Let Control come to see me. He's such a coward. Why did I let you bunch of trash lock me up here? If you dare, come to see me alone. Control, your Chinese name is Mo Jingshin, right? Get the hell over here." After cursing for several days, Atuta didn't get any food or water. After 4 or 5 days, he had no strength to curse anymore and was on the verge of death. If he hadn't fainted once, and the people of 11 Base hadn't poured cold water on him to force him to wake up and continue to be tortured, he would have been dead by now. However, the saliva was still stinky. It tasted like the feces and urine of the dogs raised in this base. The wounds on Atuta's body had already dried up. Blood and torn clothes were stuck to his body, and his yellow hair was messy on top of his head and almost tied into a knot. He was still cursing, panting weakly. "Control, don't think I'll die as easily as Akib." "Of course you won't die as easily as Akib. I don't need to come here in person. The people here have thousands of ways to make you beg for death." Suddenly hearing the voice from outside, Atuta frowned and immediately looked up at the man who finally showed up outside the door. The moment he saw Mo Jingshin clearly, his brows immediately darkened. The man who rarely came back to 11 Base from the hospital looked at Atuta, who was in a mess, and said in a low, hoarse, and careless voice, "You tried everything you could to get the source of the underground arms from me, just for the endless wealth. You two brothers risked your lives one after another, but you didn't hear me say anything. You don't want to give up, do you?" Atuda sneered. "Even if you don't tell us the source of those channels, I'm afraid you won't take those things. Don't you think it's a pity to hide billions of dollars worth of wealth under your silence? You've been making money in various war-torn countries and eating the food of the dead for so many years, but you haven't even made billions. Don't expect to get the money after I tell you the channel. For a good-for-nothing like you, even if I put those things in front of you, you won't be able to take the astronomical figure." The lighter Mo Jingshin's tone was the thicker the disdain in it was. Chapter 696. After receiving a call from the hospital, Mo Jingshan left 11 base again and hurried back to the hospital. Dr. Wendell said that Jean Wan was kidnapped by those Cambodians before she passed the critical period. She must have hit her head when she was taken into the car, and the head injury caused subarachnoid hemorrhage. Although it was not fatal, it was hard to predict when she would wake up. When Mo Jingshan returned to the hospital, he was wearing the same clothes as when he returned to the base, black trousers and a black t-shirt. Knowing that it was hard to predict when Jean Wan would wake up, he looked decadent and dark. Apart from changing his clothes and taking a shower, he hadn't tidied himself up for a few days. His short black hair was a little messy due to the wind, but he still had a handsome face with deep facial features. He just left with a cold expression. He walked back to the ICU ward and watched the scene through the glass. Because Jean Wan couldn't move anymore, the brain surgery couldn't be transferred to the operating room, but was carried out directly in the ICU. Through the protective glass window, Mo Jingshin looked at Jean Wan lying there coldly. She didn't even need to be anesthetized and didn't seem to feel anything during the operation. The doctors were busy operating on her. Various medical instruments beeped from time to time, and there were images of heart, breathing, blood pressure, and so on. Looking at the faint heartbeat on the image, Mo Jingshin's eyes were filled with emotion. Stepping on the cold ground, he stood straight in front of the glass. When Kay came back, he saw Mo Jingshin standing there coldly and solemnly, so he quickly walked up to him. Kay knew that Jean Wan was in critical condition recently, and Mr. Mo couldn't leave, so he respectfully told him what had happened to Atuda in the base. He estimated that Atuda wouldn't be able to live for more than a few days. After briefly explaining how to deal with those people related to Atuda, he didn't disturb him anymore and left. The hospital corridor outside the ICU fell silent again. Mo Jingshan looked at Jean Wan, who was unconscious, slowly raised his hand and put on the glass window. His palm gradually closed, clenched into a fist, and his knuckles turned white. 1 week later, Jean Wan was still unconscious. There was an oxygen tube in her nose, and there was an injection on the back of her hand. The back of her hand, which was already riddled with holes, was pale and covered in bruises left by the needle holes. Fortunately, since this morning, Jean Wan's wounds had already healed. Her internal organs that had been injured by the bullet had also recovered well. Although she was still in the ICU, she was allowed 2 hours of visitation every day. Chin Siding walked into the ward and saw Mo Jingshin sitting by the bed, watching Jean Wan in deep sleep. These days, Mo Jingshin stayed with her for as long as she slept. The vice president and his assistant were in charge of the company's internal and external affairs. She couldn't eat, and Mo Jingshin hardly ate these days. He only took a few bites when they forced him to the table. Chin Siding came up behind him. "Your cell phone rang. I took a look. It's the G family in High City. I guess G one hasn't been heard from these days. Ji Hongwen must have something to talk to her about." Mo Jingshan took a look at the time. "I'll call him back later." Chin Siding nodded. "Jean Wan is so badly injured now. Don't tell the people in High City. Wait until her vital signs are all stabilized. Otherwise, so many people will come all the way here, especially your grandfather. He is so old. The less he knows about these things, the less he will worry about." Mo Jingshan didn't speak anymore. His eyes were still on the face of the person sleeping on the bed, motionless. He knew that Mo Jingshan's current state seemed to have nothing to do with him except for waiting for Jin Wan to wake up. Qin Siding didn't say more. He just patted him on the shoulder and then looked at Jin Wan, who was also sleeping as if she didn't even have a dream. She was motionless, and her face was so pale that she didn't look like a real person. Mo Jingshan put his hand on Jin Wan's uninjected hand and held her bruised hand firmly in his palm. Another half a month passed. Mo Jingshan had been allowed to accompany Jin Wan in her ward every day. He had been holding the woman's white, tender, and soft hand. At this time, the cell phone on the bedside vibrated. Mo Jingshan took a look at it and raised his other hand to pick up the phone. Mr. Mo, Atuda has an adoptive father in Mexico. Is the godfather of the Mexican mafia. More than 20 years ago, he was also active in war-torn countries all over the world. In recent years, most of his forces have been taken away, and the remaining men and wealth are not enough to support him. So he sent Atuda to find a way to get those underground arms channels from you, so as to earn billions of dollars. Now we've found Atuda's adoptive father. He was diagnosed with liver cancer a few months ago and is lying in the hospital waiting to die. Seeing Atuda's failure, his men have all run away. There are only a dozen of them around him, but they're now under our control. He wants to call you. Do you want to answer it? Mo Jingshan said coldly. You are going to die. What else do you want to say? The other party handed the phone to Atuda's adoptive father, and then an old and weak voice rang. Mr. Control, I met you many years ago, but at that time you didn't find out who I was. I didn't expect that now my only adopted son has fallen into your hands. Mo Jingshan didn't speak. He just put Jin Wan's hand in his palm and slowly stroked it, gently stroking each of her fingers as if to warm her cold hands so that they wouldn't stay cold. Mr. Control, there's a saying in China that a mantis is trying to stop a chariot. I know this is the situation we are in now, and I'm not qualified to negotiate with you, but I have no son. Atuda is my only adopted son. He's been very loyal and filial to me for many years. I'm willing to give you the rest of my wealth as long as you let him go. Now I want to know, what have you done to my adopted son? There was a cold and frivolous sneer in Mo Jingshan's dark eyes. You should ask me what I'm going to do to you. The meaning behind his words was that he would not let them go, and that he would capture every single one of them, from top to bottom, was shockingly clear. Chapter 697. Mo Jingshan abruptly threw his cell phone aside and held Jin Wan's hand hard. He could clearly feel the faint movement of her fingers in his palm. Before he hung up the phone, Atuda's adoptive father's voice rang. Mr. Control, we can negotiate. Please. Mo Jingshan ignored the phone call and hung up. He looked at the woman on the bed whose eyes were still closed and called her in a low voice, Wan Wan. Jin Wan's hand moved twice in his palm as if it was conscious. Although the movement was weak, it was 1,000 times better than the state she had been in for the past few days when she seemed to be unconscious and had no reaction at all. Mo Jingshan ordered someone to call Dr. Wendell. Dr. Wendell did a series of examinations on Jin Wan and then nodded with relief. Miss G's vitality and willpower have always been in her subconscious. She didn't give up. Fortunately, her injury is not fatal. As long as she continues to recuperate for a while, her internal and external injuries will be fine, and there won't be any sequelae. However, although the operation went well, there is no guarantee that the bleeding in some blood vessels will be completely cured. We still can't predict when she will wake up in the short term, but her body has regained consciousness. Even if she doesn't wake up, when she recovers to a certain extent, she can be taken out to bask in the sun every day to enhance her immunity and adjust her body to a healthy state. You mean we still can't predict when she will wake up in the short term? Mo Jingshan frowned. It means that it's up to Miss G to decide when she will wake up and whether she will be affected in all aspects after she wakes up. Dr. Qin should have already told you that although this kind of subarachnoid hemorrhage in the head is not fatal, this kind of hemorrhage will oppress the brain nerves and may affect her state of consciousness after she wakes up. But still, we'll only know after she wakes up. Qin Siding did say that this kind of hemorrhage was likely to affect her intelligence and consciousness for a period of time, and she would often have headaches if the remaining blood outside the blood vessels was not absorbed by herself. But the question now was, when would she wake up? When Dr. Wendell left, M.O. Jingshan looked at her quiet and motionless fingers and habitually held her hand again. In less than a month of suffering, he was so exhausted. If it were Jin Wan 3 years ago, she wouldn't even be able to see his face for 2 whole months. When he finally woke up, she was faced with a man she could no longer approach. What kind of despair and heartache must she have felt at that time? Yet she persisted by his side for such a long time. The hysteria in her heart was forcibly suppressed by her deliberate calmness on the surface. For the first time, M.O. Jingshan began to doubt everything he had done for her good. He would rather start all over again than hold her tightly in his arms when he opened his eyes 3 years ago. The man lowered his head and kissed her fingers, his hoarse voice low and deep. "It's all my fault." A month later, the direct flight from Los Angeles to High City landed at High City Airport. M.O. Jingshan carried Jin Wan out of the airport and then gently put her into the car. Facing the woman who had been motionless with her eyes closed, he whispered in a comforting tone, "Good girl, let's go home. We've been flying for more than 10 hours. We need to go to Chin's Sightings Hospital for a checkup first. If you're okay, we'll go back to the U Garden. I've asked Annie Chun and the others to go back. Everyone will accompany you." He held her in the car. Shinmu, who came to pick them up, didn't say a word and drove away from the airport. Jin Wan didn't resist or move in M.O. Jingshan's arms. Even a few days before returning to High City, Dr. Wendell said she had recovered a lot of consciousness, but she hadn't woken up yet. Although the gunshot wound had healed, it was her internal organs that were seriously damaged. She couldn't do too much exercise and had to rest quietly for at least a few months. Gunshot wounds were not child's play. Whether it was a member of a Western war-torn country or a member of 11 base on a mission, the chance of survival after being hit by a bullet was very small. Jin Wan's wound was almost fatal. It was a miracle that she could survive. Everything took time. During this waiting time, staying in the cold hospital in Los Angeles was not the most comfortable place for Jin Wan. It was better to go back to High City. It was better to let her go back to her favorite place and be accompanied and taken care of by the people closest to her, most trusted, and most familiar. When they returned to the U Garden, Annie Chun and the others were already waiting. Seeing M.O. Jingshan carrying Jin Wan out of the car, she hurriedly came up to greet them. "Mr. Mo, madam." Before being invited back to the U Garden, Annie Chun had carefully asked about Jin Wan. When she learned that Jin Wan had been seriously injured in Los Angeles and had been in a coma for more than a month, she had been worried. Now she finally saw Jin Wan, but she just let M.O. Jingshan hold her, motionless, as if she didn't have any reaction. Annie Chen's eyes instantly turned red. "Madam," M.O. Jingshan didn't speak, but walked in with Jin Wan in his arms. The villa, the manor, and the interior decoration of the U Garden had all changed, but it looked more suitable for the two of them than before. Andy Chun and the other servants hurriedly followed them in. M.O. Jingshan put Jin Wan on the sofa and ran his fingers through her long hair. Then, she sat motionlessly on the sofa. He squatted in front of her and held her hand in his palm. "Wan, let's go home." After Jin Wan was brought back to High City, because Annie Chun and the others were taking care of her, M.O. Jingshan hadn't been involved in the company's affairs for nearly 2 months and finally began to put them back on the agenda. However, he came home on time every day and didn't attend any social events in person, leaving them all to his subordinates. Every night, he slept in the same master bedroom with Jin Wan. During the day, Annie Chun and the servants fed her on time, and at night, M.O. Jingshan fed her water and took care of her personally. Even if she didn't wake up, he wouldn't let her suffer at all. Ji Hongwon and Xiao Jinjuan came to visit separately, but they were both blocked by Annie Chun. Without M.O. Jingshan's permission, no one could go in and disturb Jin Wan. For many days, only Chin's Sighting, as a doctor, could enter the U Garden occasionally, but most of the time, he came to check on Jin Wan to confirm her recovery. Other than him, no one else had the chance to approach the U Garden. Chapter 698. Shine Group. which had resumed for 2 weeks because of CEO Mo's return, was holding a high-level meeting. The meeting was still going on, and a department head was pointing to the recently enlarged PowerPoint presentation in front of the screen in front of him to report work. Although CEO Mo was back, everyone could feel that the work atmosphere in the company was much more depressed. Almost everyone worked in a dangerous environment every day. Special Assistant Shun had told all the departments to go to the Deputy CEO's assistant and secretary's office first if they had any problems, and to let the subordinates solve the problems first. They should try not to disturb CEO Mo or go directly to the CEO's office. When a meeting was about to end, Mo Jingshan's cell phone on the conference table began to vibrate. Mo Jingshan glanced at the caller ID. Usually, if it was an unimportant call, Mo Jingshan wouldn't pick it up during the company's high-level meeting. But when he saw it was from the U Garden, he picked up the phone and picked it up. Mr. Mo, Madam is awake. Even though Annie Chin briefly explained the situation on the phone, U Garden was in a mess that Mo Jingshan didn't expect at all. Madam, come out. No one here will hurt you. Don't be afraid. I'm Annie Chun, Annie Chun. Do you remember me? Madam, it's too stuffy in the wardrobe. Come out. Mrs. Mo, this is your home. Don't be afraid. Come out. Annie Chun and several servants all stood outside the wardrobe in the master bedroom, facing the closed wardrobe door, and kept shouting nervously and worriedly at the wardrobe. Madam will really suffocate if she goes on like this. Annie Chun, let's open the door, a servant whispered. Auntie Chin hesitated and reached out to open the wardrobe door. However, as soon as the door was opened, Jin Wan, who was curled up in the wardrobe, buried her head in her knees and hugged herself tightly as if she had been greatly frightened. Seeing her like this, Annie Chun bent down to coax her. Madam, get out, get out, get out. Jin Wan refused to look up, shrank her neck, and shouted in a muffled voice. Annie Chun had no choice. Fearing that she would really be frightened, she hurriedly took 2 steps back. Dr. Chin had said that if Jin Wan woke up one day, she might not be in a good state of mind, so they should be mentally prepared. Although they were mentally prepared, no one expected Madam to be like this. Seeing Jin Wan's shoulders trembling, Annie Chun had to close the wardrobe door again, but she carefully put a towel in the middle to make the gap between the wardrobe doors wider, lest Jin Wan really suffocate inside. Less than 20 minutes after the call, Mo Jingshan, who was in the Shine Group's office building dozens of miles away, rushed back. When he entered the bedroom, he saw the mess on the floor. The quilt and pillows were thrown to the ground, and most of the things on the bedside table and table were on the ground. Water was spilled all over the carpet. Several servants and Annie Chun were gathered around the wardrobe door. Mo Jingshan's eyes were fixed on the wardrobe. Mr. Mo, you're back. After Madam woke up, she didn't recognize anyone and was very scared. We fed her water and food, but she didn't want to eat or drink, and the medicine and water were all knocked over. No matter what we said, she wouldn't listen. Then she hid in the wardrobe alone and wouldn't come out no matter how we called her. Seeing Mo Jingshan come back, the servant hurriedly turned to him as if asking for help. Mo Jingshan quickly walked to the wardrobe door. The moment he opened it, he saw that Jin Wan, who had been unconscious for a long time, could finally sit up on her own. But at this moment, she was like a helpless and ignorant child, terrified of everything around her, curled up in the corner of the wardrobe, trembling all over. Wan, Mo Jingshan bent down to carry her out. But when Jin Wan heard someone open the wardrobe door to talk to her, she was even more frightened and shrank into the corner of the wardrobe. Jin Wan, it's me. Mo Jingshan had been mentally prepared because of Chin's sightings' repeated reminders. But now she looked like she was not just mentally affected. Seeing that she had been hiding and that Auntie Chun had said on the phone that she had been hiding in the cabinet for almost an hour and refused to come out, Mo Jingshan turned his head and ordered, "Call Dr. Chin over." At the same time, the man put his long arm in and picked up Jin Wan, who was almost curled up into a ball. As she struggled and screamed in his arms, he held her firmly in his arms and turned to put her on the bed. Jin Wan hurriedly withdrew from his arms, but Mo Jingshan pulled the quilt that Auntie Chin hurriedly picked up from the carpet and wrapped it around her thin pajamas, pressed her into his arms, and patted her back comfortingly. Don't be afraid. This is the U Garden. There's no danger. We're all here with you. Don't be afraid, okay? Jinwan didn't know if it was because Mo Jingshan's clear and clean smell made her feel familiar, or because of his voice or his words that comforted her, but Jinwan gradually softened in his arms. Mo Jingshan looked down at her still pale little face, raised his hand to touch her face, and said lovingly, "No matter what you're afraid of, no one here will hurt you. Trust me, be good." Jinwan took a few quick breaths in his arms and clenched her hands into fists. After a long time, she shrank into his arms and said hoarsely, as if she had been wronged, "Where is the U Garden?" Mo Jingshan's eyelids twitched because of her words. The other servants had gone out, and only Auntie Chun stood by the bed and looked at them worriedly. Mo Jingshan held Jinwan's chin with one hand and looked at her helpless eyes. "Don't you remember?" Jinwan looked at him blankly and subconsciously raised her hand to grab the collar of his shirt. She stared at his face for a long time before saying, "I think I've seen you before, but what's your name?" Her tone sounded different from usual. Her confused and puzzled expression made Mo Jingshan's mood fall to the bottom of the valley. Dr. Qin rushed over after receiving the call. When he arrived, he saw Jinwan curled up in Mo Jingshan's arms. Except for Mo Jingshan, she would hide behind him if anyone else came near. Chapter 699. Hearing that Dr. Qin said he could definitely cure her, Annie Chun breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. Madam has suffered so much and finally woken up. Please don't have any other problems. As long as she can be cured, we'll cooperate with you in any way." Annie Chun said and looked at Jinwan, who seemed to think Mo Jingshan looked familiar. She curled up in Mo Jingshan's arms and didn't even look at the others. It was clear that no matter who she looked at, there was only fear in her eyes, except for Mo Jingshan. It could be as short as a week or as long as half a year. It would be fine if Madam could continue to trust and rely on Mr. Mo during this period of time. Qin Sighting saw that Jinwan was no longer paying attention to the others by the bed, or her attention was easily attracted by some small things. She was playing with the silver gray buttons on Mo Jingshan's shirt collar. Mo Jingshan looked down at her and didn't stop her from playing, but tightened his arms around her waist and raised his eyes. Jinwan's condition was indeed beyond everyone's expectation, but when Qin Sighting learned the location of Jinwan's injury, he asked Dr. Wendell if it would affect her intelligence and mental state. Qin Sighting was a leader in the field of internal medicine and had a deep understanding of the neurological field, so what he said must have some basis. "Are you sure she doesn't have any other problems? Doesn't she need to go to the hospital for a specific examination?" "You can go to the hospital for examination, but given her current condition, she will be stimulated and frightened by any unfamiliar people or strangers. In my opinion, her IQ is only about 7 or 10 years old, and her thinking and memory are in a mess. Sometimes she remembers something, and sometimes she doesn't. Now, the most important thing is to guide her correctly. Don't let her go with malicious people, and don't let her leave your sight easily. I'll contact the scientific research institute I'm familiar with and ask them to develop more effective drugs to treat her as soon as possible." With that, Qin Sighting took a look at the mess on the ground and the open cabinet door. He didn't need to ask to know what was going on. Also, she occasionally has uncontrollable irritability because of headaches. You must not stimulate her. You'd better keep her in an environment that she feels safe and comfortable. Don't come into contact with people she used to hate or hate. And don't meet people who will make her feel extreme, because she will recall memories of the past from time to time, but she doesn't understand the source of those memories and will collapse. Why don't you answer me? What's your name? Jinwan rested her head in Mo Jingshan's arms. It seemed that after being held by him like this for a while, the familiar feeling made her no longer have any resistance to him. But she was looking at him with a pair of red eyes, a little curious and a little cautious. Her hand was still clutching the buttons on the front of his shirt, unconsciously fiddling back and forth. Mo Jingshan raised his hand and held her hand very gently and carefully. He held her hand firmly in his palm and looked down at her. Seeing the confusion in her eyes and the pure and childlike eyes in her eyes, his heart skipped a beat. He bent down and whispered hoarsely in her ear, "I'm your husband. Don't be afraid, husband?" Jinwan thought carefully about the word she knew for a long time before she blurted out, "Is it the person who will sleep with me?" Mo Jingshun. Auntie Chen, Qin sighting. After leaving the bedroom, Qin sighting continued to tell Annie Chun about Jinwan's current situation and then drove back to the hospital to get the medicine. In the bedroom, Jinwan had been leaning in Mo Jingshun's arms. Her hand was no longer playing with his buttons, but she pinched his face as if to make sure whether he was a man in her dream or a real man. She stared at his face and said in a low voice, "I seem to have seen you before." Mo Jingshun took her hand, held her like this, opened her palm, and patiently wrote his name in her palm. "Can you read?" Jinwan stared blankly at the slender fingers that were writing in her palm and read, "Mo Jingshun." After reading it, she was stunned for a long time before she murmured, "This name is a little familiar." Hearing this, Mo Jingshun didn't know whether to rejoice or feel heartache. He felt heartache because she had woken up but still had this sequela because of her injury. In the end, she still had to continue receiving treatment. Fortunately, although her memory was chaotic and her mind was unclear, she had some impression of everyone related to him. She hadn't forgotten him, but her memory was chaotic and she couldn't tell the situation clearly. Just as Mo Jingshun held her hand in his again and didn't speak, Jinwan suddenly raised her head in his arms and gave him the first smile since she woke up. Although she still smiled cautiously, as if she only felt safe by his side and didn't want to leave him, fearing that he wouldn't want her anymore, she grinned and said, "Then can I call you Shin Shin?" Mo Jingshun raised his eyebrows. "Call me what?" "Shun Shun." Jinwan's hand tugged at his shirt again, as if afraid he would refuse. Looking at her nervous and cautious eyes, Mo Jingshun's heart ached, but at the same time, it seemed to melt. He said patiently and warmly, "Well, as long as you're happy." Sure enough, Jinwan was happy at once. And then all kinds of questions came out of her mouth, such as why he was her husband, why she couldn't remember clearly, why so many people surrounded her and called her madam when she woke up, why these people asked her to take medicine. And Mo Jingshun answered her patiently until Jinwan fell asleep in his arms. He looked at the little woman in his arms, who was still pale when she slept, and put her on the bed. He put his hand on the back of her head, stroked her soft hair, and finally withdrew his hand, lowering his eyes to look at the little woman who was sleeping quietly. When Mo Jingshun walked out of the master bedroom, Annie Chan was carrying the food that she had just served. After all, Jinwan had knocked over a lot of things as soon as she woke up, but she still had to eat something. However, when she saw Mr. Mo's expression when he came out, Annie Chun couldn't help shivering when she saw him. It was almost winter outside of High City, but the floor heating in the room was very warm. Chapter 700. At night, Jinwan fell asleep and suddenly woke up. Mo Jingshun, who was sitting by the bed flipping through the company documents, immediately noticed her strange behavior. He tossed the documents in his hands onto the bedside table and casually hugged the little woman who had just woken up and suddenly sat up. "What's wrong?" The man's low, soothing voice was close to her ear. Jinwan's fingers slowly trembled uncontrollably, and her shoulders also trembled. Her mind went blank for a moment. Blood. Jinwan's eyes were a little blank, and she kept staring at a certain point in the room as if she hadn't seen anything. However, when Mo Jingshun looked at her carefully, he found that her eyes were unfocused, as if she hadn't completely woken up from a dream, but she was in a state of shock. "I saw a lot of blood. Someone pointed a gun at me." No matter what, Jinwan was a little woman living in a peaceful world. Although she subconsciously did this kind of behavior to block the bullet, it didn't guarantee that she didn't feel fear in her heart. Even people who had been trained in a base like 11 all year round would feel fear in the face of such a life-or-death situation. That was the fear of human nature. "It's all right. It's all over. Now it's just a dream. It's just a dream. Good girl, don't be afraid." Mo Jingshin comforted her and patted her on the back. He knew that she was just in a dream and not awake, so he kept his voice very low, lest she would be more afraid if she suddenly woke up. Jinwan leaned her head on his shoulder, almost holding her breath, and said hoarsely, "A lot of blood." It was more than a lot of blood. It was all her blood. Mo Jingshan held her, his thin lips pressed against her ear, and kept comforting her until the little woman closed her eyes again and her breathing gradually became even. This kind of night lasted for 3 days before Ji-Nwan gradually got rid of those nightmares. When she slept, she would no longer be woken up by those nightmares. On the contrary, probably every time she dreamed of something terrible, she would always hear Mo Jingshin's comforting voice in her ear, and she habitually became more and more dependent on him. During the day, when Mo Jingshan went to the company for 2 or 3 hours because of a company meeting, during the 2 or 3 hours when he was not in the Yew Garden, Jinwan either sat alone on the bed, curled up in the quilt, and did not allow anyone to touch her, or stood in a daze by the window, stubbornly and foolishly waiting for him to come back. Only when Mo Jingshin returned would Jinwan reveal a smile and throw herself into his arms, unwilling to let go. Every time Annie Chun saw Jinwan throw herself into Mr. Mo's arms, she would cover her eyes and walk away. Well, anyway, Dr. Chin said that it wouldn't take long for Madame's illness to be cured. Her current state was simply a sweet burden to Mr. Mo. It seemed that ever since the divorce, Mrs. Mo had never been so close to Mr. Mo, but who said that Mrs. Mo's feelings for Mr. Mo had long been exhausted. She wanted to get close to him when she was unconscious, and she only trusted and relied on him. Obviously, in Mrs. Mo's mind, she couldn't leave him at all. "Mr. Mo, when you went to the company for a meeting, Madame refused to eat lunch. We just want to reheat the lunch." Annie Chun went downstairs to bring up lunch. These days, most of the time, it was Mo Jingshin who fed Jinwan or accompanied her to watch her eat. But as long as Mo Jingshin was not around, Jinwan didn't even drink water, let alone eat. At first, Annie Chun thought she was just throwing a tantrum, but then she gradually found that Jinwan was just afraid and guarded against all the people she didn't know, as if she were afraid of eating something dangerous and refused to open her mouth to accept a mouthful of food. This subconscious guard left Annie Chun helpless and could only turn to Mo Jingshin for help. "Put it on the table. I'll feed her," Mo Jingshin said and patted Jinwan's shoulder. "Sit down and eat first. Take me with you wherever you go in the future. I don't want to stay here alone." Jinwan's voice was muffled. Before coming back from the company, Mo Jingshin had carefully considered this problem. "Okay," he whispered softly, "I won't go to the company these days. I'll stay at home with you. I won't leave, okay?" "Really?" Jinwan raised her head. Obviously, it was difficult for her to understand the words company and home. In her chaotic memory, she didn't remember that she was still the head of MN Group. She just instinctively wanted to find a little sense of security in the Yew Garden. She had been wandering alone for 3 years, struggling hard for 3 years, and now, one day, she could finally put down her sense of responsibility. It was a good thing to let her rest like this. "Really?" Mo Jingshin patted her head. "Can we eat now?" Jinwan nodded hesitantly. These days, Jinwan liked to eat by herself, but she liked to be rewarded by him every time she ate, such as a look of appreciation or encouragement from Mo Jingshin, or the smile in his eyes when she ate an extra dish or a small bowl of rice, which made her so proud that she kept stuffing food into her mouth. Mo Jingshin sat by and watched her eat. From time to time, he picked up a tissue to wipe the soup from the corner of her mouth or the rice grains from the corner of her mouth. All the positions in Shine Group were always in an orderly manner. Because he traveled between High City and Los Angeles all year round, whether it was the headquarters in Los Angeles or the branch in China, there were specialized personnel to fill in the gaps when he was not around. Therefore, at the executive meeting today, he specifically said that he would not personally come to the company in the near future. If there were any documents or matters that needed him to deal with, he could have a video conference or ask Shinmu to send the documents to the Yew Garden for him to handle. He would not appear in the company in the short term. Right now, he had to accompany Jinwan and couldn't let her unstable emotions be affected. He had to see her with his own eyes to rest assured. As for MN Group, when Jean Wan went to Los Angeles on a business trip a few months ago, she had asked Xia Tian to return to the company. Xia Tian's children were now taken care of by the Annie at home, and the company's affairs were still temporarily managed by Xia Tian. The executives of MN Group were also very stable under Jean Wan's management. Although there were some doubts about Jean Wan's absence in recent months, Xia Tian was a well-behaved and experienced person in management, so it didn't take long for everything to settle down. Chapter 701. Mr. Mo, this is the express delivery from the housekeeper in Yuehu Bay. Auntie Chan signed for a parcel outside the door, took it into the U-Garden, and handed it to Mo Jingshan. What express delivery? Mo Jingshan glanced at the box in Annie Chen's hand. I don't know. The housekeeper you arranged to live there just said on the phone that it was ordered by Mrs. Mo before she went on a business trip to Los Angeles. It was mailed back to Yuehu Bay last month, but Mrs. Mo was not there, so it was kept in the security room. Later, the security guard knocked on Mrs. Mo's door and was seen by the housekeeper you arranged to receive it. Knowing that you and Mrs. Mo had returned, she asked someone to send it to the U-Garden. Annie Chun said, and put the small box on the coffee table. Do you want me to open it first? Mo Jingshan looked at the express delivery box and thought for a moment. Give it to me. Auntie Chun hurriedly picked it up and handed it to him. The box was not heavy, so the thing inside was not big. Mo Jingshan weighed it in his hand and turned into the bedroom. Jean Wan was resting at the moment. The medicine Qin Siding gave her could help her sleep. Every day after taking the medicine at noon, she had to sleep for 2 hours, which would help the medicine take effect and help her absorb the remaining blood in the blood vessels in her head. Seeing that Jean Wan was still sleeping, Mo Jingshan put the express delivery on the table, and after a while, he opened it. Inside was a light blue velvet box. As soon as he saw this velvet box, Mo Jingshan's eyes almost knew the answer. She opened it and saw that it was indeed the 10-carat blue diamond. However, the blue diamond that she had always kept at home and refused to wear was now carefully inlaid on a very exquisite white gold necklace. It looked very simple, but the workmanship of the diamond holder was very exquisite. It could be seen that the designer had put a lot of effort into it. The simple necklace paired with the gorgeous 10-carat blue diamond formed a different style. It was very suitable for her temperament and also completely set off the beauty of the blue diamond. Jean Wan had already inlaid the blue diamond he gave her before she went to Los Angeles, which showed that she was trying to take another step in his direction. Looking at the necklace in his hand, Mo Jingshan got up and gently put the necklace on her neck. Jean Wan turned her head slightly in her sleep, just enough for him to fasten the back of the necklace without waking her up. Looking at the blue diamond quietly pressed against her collarbone, it made her already fair skin look even whiter. Because Jean Wan had not fully recovered from her illness, the depression in her heart was finally dispelled. Thinking of the day when this little woman first arrived in Los Angeles, she kept saying that she didn't go to Los Angeles to find him. That kind of tone was really lovable and hateful. The Ji family and the Xiao family had been waiting for Jean Wan's news, but there had been no news of her since she was brought back to High City by Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan's explanation was that Jean Wan had been ill recently and was not fit to go out to meet people. No matter how serious his illness was, he could refuse to see outsiders, but he could not refuse to see his own family. Ji Hongwen rushed out of the company in the afternoon on the weekend and directly asked the driver to drive to the hospital. He didn't expect that at almost the same time, the Xiao family's car also stopped outside the U-Garden. Mr. Mo Jingshan was having a video conference with the people in Los Angeles in the study. At this time, Annie Chun didn't dare to disturb him, but now she had to disturb him. Hearing the knock on the door and then hearing Annie Chen's movement, Mo Jingshan made a pause gesture to the person on the other side of the video conference and looked back at Annie Chun, who was at the door. Knowing that she wouldn't come in easily under normal circumstances, he asked indifferently, "What happened?" "The Ji family and the Xiao family have come. I can't stop them too much. I stopped them last time, but this time I really don't have any reason to stop them. Chairman Ji is Mrs. Mo's father, and he insisted on coming to see how Mrs. M.O. was. I couldn't refuse him, but Mr. Xiao also said that he was Mrs. Mo's father. I don't understand what's going on, but they have come in now. Annie Chun was a little confused. I'm afraid that Mrs. M.O. will be frightened when she sees them. After all, she has only let down her guard against the servants in the Yu Garden and you, Mr. M.O. As for the others, I'm really worried that she will be affected. After all, Dr. Qin said that she is prone to be irritable now. M.O. Jingshan was silent for a moment. It was not difficult to imagine what kind of earth-shaking quarrel Xiao Zhenjuan and Ji Hongwan would have when they met. In front of Jin Wan, she definitely couldn't stand such a scene. He directly told the person on the other side of the video conference that the meeting would be suspended and that they would continue at another time. He got up and walked out of the study. At the same time, Xiao Zhenjuan and Ji Hongwan finally saw Jin Wan. But to their surprise, the daughter they missed so much was fiercely repulsed by their appearance and even seemed to be very afraid. A servant said that Mrs. Mo's illness was because of a brain injury and that there was still some blood left after the surgery, and she was still unconscious. At this moment, the two people who had been quarreling from the door into the villa didn't dare to say anything to provoke her. Jin Wan saw that the two of them had not allowed either of them to approach her, regardless of whether it was Ji Hongwan or Xiao Zhenjuan. Even at this moment, when the servant came over to comfort her and offered her a cup of warm water for her to drink to stabilize her emotions, she smashed the cup. Anyone could see that right now. She really couldn't see any strangers because anyone who suddenly appeared would cause her chaotic memories to become even more chaotic. She wanted to remember something, but couldn't, so she became even more irritable. At this moment, there was a slight sound of movement, and a man walked in from a door. Ever since M.O. Jingshan took a vacation to accompany Jin Wan, he usually wore a gray t-shirt or soft and comfortable home clothes at home. Today, he was wearing a dark t-shirt and long pants, but he did not lose his usual stern and upright appearance. His handsome and cold face revealed a hint of coldness, and his entire person was filled with an intimidating coldness. He looked at the woman who was curled up under the bed like a frightened cat, and his eyes darkened. His long legs opened, and he directly walked over. When he walked over, his eyes did not look at Ji Hongwan and Xiao Jun. They were too clear that although M.O. Jingshan appeared to be humble in front of them, when it came to Jin Wan's safety, he never really cared about anyone. Just when they thought that Jin Wan would lose control of her emotions and cry out because of M.O. Jingshan's touch, in the next second, the author's words, 1. The female lead did not lose her memory. There are indeed clinical cases of this illness. As long as she is treated with medicine, she will recover quickly. The cycle is very short, and the recovery is very fast. 2. For the past 3 years, Jin Wan had been supporting herself and growing stronger on her own. I had been trying to find a suitable opportunity for her to rely on M.O. Tianan to make up for all the grievances she had suffered, to let the male lead truly feel the adorable female lead who is especially dependent on him for a period of time. Guaranteed sweet. If it's not sweet, it's free. 3. From here until the end of the main text, there will be no more torture. The wife-doting maniac has begun to protect his wife. Chapter 702. Wan. M.O. Jingshan put his hand on her shoulder and pushed aside the messy hair around her neck. The moment Jin Wan saw him, when he bent down to pick her up, she instinctively threw herself at him, her hands clutching his sleeves tightly. M.O. Jingshan's movements were meticulous and focused. He picked her up from the ground. Even though Jin Wan was trembling all over as if she would break in his arms in the next second, he put her on the bed as if he didn't see the people in front of the door. Jin Wan was frightened and repulsed by everyone, but she didn't reject M.O. Jingshan's approach. Instead, she seemed to rely on him. To be precise, she didn't take the initiative to respond. When M.O. Jingshan picked her up, she didn't make any aggressive movements. She just let the man tidy up her hair and clothes and put her on the bed. The maid who was familiar with Jin Wan came to hand her water, which almost made her lose control on the spot. But M.O. Jingshan was different. The cold, tall man sat down by the bed and put his hand on Jean Wan's hand, which was clutching the quilt nervously. His voice was low and quiet. I'll let them leave. You stay in the bedroom and rest. Don't be nervous, okay? He asked her, but his tone was very light. Jean Wan didn't speak, but her body trembled a lot under his gaze. He looked at her pale little face and continued to ask in a low voice, Did you not recognize them? Or did you have a headache when you saw them? She still didn't want to speak, but raised her hand and knocked her head. Obviously, she had a headache. Seeing her like this, Imo Jingshin didn't ask more. He tucked her in, got up, and looked at the two people in front of the door who were stunned by this scene. Seeing Imo Jingshin come over, Ji Hongwen frowned. Jingshin, why is Nguyen Wan like this? Didn't you say she was just sick? Is she seriously injured? Even her head is injured? Xiao Zhenjuan also frowned and looked at Jean Wan, who didn't recognize him at all. Usually, no matter how much Jean Wan rejected the Xiao family, at least she could talk calmly and rationally. Even if she didn't want to listen, she would listen to him quietly. But now Jean Wan, it was hard to imagine what she had been through with her blurred five senses. As a result, Xiao Zhenjuan's gaze on Imo Jingshin became much colder. What exactly is going on with her? The tall, cold man looked at them coldly, and his low voice was even colder. The security facilities of the Yu Garden have always been perfect. If you hadn't been Jean Wan's elders, I'm afraid you would have been driven out. Chairman Ji, Chairman Xiao, please give her enough quiet space after seeing her current situation and don't come to irritate her easily. Mo Jingshan put Jean Wan behind him and glanced at Xiao Zhenjuan, who was frowning. I know President Xiao wants to take her back. After all, the Xiao family has its own medical team. You want to treat her in person, but as you can see, she is very irritable now. If you take her to another place, I don't know what will happen to her. I hope President Xiao can understand her physical condition and don't make things difficult for her. Don't force her. Xiao Zhenjuan's face changed slightly. It wasn't hard to tell that Mo Jingshan was warning him. He looked at Jean Wan, who was protected by Mo Jingshan on the bed, and said coldly, So, Mo, my daughter was fine a few months ago, and I just learned about her birth. I tried my best to get closer to her, but now she has become like this. Aren't you responsible for this? Ji Hongwen frowned and said, Jingshan has always been affectionate to Nguyen Wan. He would rather bear the pain himself than let her get hurt easily. I've seen how he treats Jean Wan. There's no need to blame him. Isn't it obvious that Nguyen Wan is still so dependent on him? Regardless of whether it's me, the father who watched her grow up, or you, the biological father whom she hasn't seen for more than 20 years, to her, we're both very unfamiliar. Only toward Jingshan, she trusts him completely. What else is there to pursue? Xiao Zhenjuan's face darkened, and his tone was very bad. The Xiao family's medical team is very professional. If Nguyen Wan can't go to the Xiao family to recuperate, send a medical team here to treat her 24 hours a day. Mo Jingshan's lips curved in a cold smile. She was already so frightened after seeing you. You sent a few unfamiliar doctors over. Are you trying to make her break down? Mo Jingshan's lips curved up coldly, and he seemed to be smiling. So, how did she suddenly become like this? What the hell is going on? Xiao Zhenjuan's face darkened. Even though Xiao Zhenjuan only wanted to bring his daughter home and did not have any intention of starting a war, and he was calm enough, when he met Mo Jingshan's cold and indifferent gaze, his heart was still ignited. His daughter was unwilling to return to the Xiao family when she was healthy. Now that she was in such a state, it wasn't easy for the Xiao family to step forward to treat her and reconcile the relationship between father and daughter. However, it was fine that Ji Hongwen was standing in the middle, but Mo Jingshan was also standing in the way. There was no room for negotiation. Mo Jingshan smiled coldly and said indifferently, Don't worry, President Xiao. I also have the most professional and authoritative doctors here. After these days of treatment, Jean Wan's headache has been greatly alleviated, and there are new drugs developed by the Research Institute to control her condition. It won't take long for her to recover. As for President Xiao, if you want to save your daughter, you'd better wait until she wakes up. Otherwise, if I hand her over to you now, I'm afraid I can't give her a reasonable explanation when she wakes up. Ji Hongwen took a step forward and said anxiously, "How long will it take?" "Don't let Wan Wan run around like this. Jingshin, you must keep an eye on her." Mo Jingshin took a look at Ji Hongwen. "Don't worry. I'm on vacation now. I'll stay by her side every day." Ji Hongwen sighed and looked at Jin Wan, who was hiding under the quilt and looking at the door. His heart ached for her, but there was nothing he could do. At this time, he could only wait for her to recover. And since Mo Jingshin had said that he had specially developed drugs for her, which would shorten the course of the disease and make her better as soon as possible, there was nothing he could do. As her father, he couldn't help her at this time. But the only thing he could be thankful for was that the person Jin Wan relied on was Mo Jingshin, not someone else with ulterior motives. Chapter 703. Xiao Zhenjuan also looked at him coldly. When the two of them were about to argue about Jin Wan again, Mo Jingshin gave Auntie Chen a look, and Auntie Chen hurriedly said, "Chairman Ji, Chairman Xiao, Mrs. Mo needs to rest now. Please leave the master bedroom and go to the living room on the first floor to have some tea." Xiao Zhenjuan's face was cold. "There's no need for tea, but I'm worried about her now. Next time I come to visit her, don't stop me. I promise I'll just look at her from a distance and won't scare her again." Hearing Xiao Zhenjuan, who had always been superior, making such a compromise, Ji Hongwen looked calm and didn't speak, and Auntie Chen still asked them to leave with a smile. As for Mo Jingshin, he just looked at them indifferently. When they both turned to go out in consideration of Jin Wan's condition, Mo Jingshin glanced at their backs and said lightly to the servant outside the door, "Next time the Xiao and Ji families come to the Yu Garden, don't stop them. It's necessary to tell me before they come in." "All right, Mr. Mo." Mo Jingshin turned and walked back to the bed. Looking at the little woman who was still hiding in the quilt, he sat on the bed and patted her on the head reassuringly. "All right, they're all gone." With that, he helped Jin Wan tuck in the quilt and didn't look at anyone outside the door. Ji Hongwen and Xiao Zhenjuan, who had gone downstairs, didn't get along well with each other. The old and new hatred of more than 20 years was still a knot that couldn't be solved. But at this time, the two of them had the same thought in their hearts. They had seen the most arrogant rich people, but their son-in-law, who was so cold and indifferent, could only swallow his anger and couldn't say a word. So who was the closest person to Jin Wan? Her adoptive father and biological father were no match for Mo Jingshin. In the master bedroom, Jin Wan sat up from the bed, looked out, and then boldly asked, "Just now those two people said they were my fathers. Why do I have two fathers?" Without saying a word, Mo Jingshin put the woman on his lap and chuckled. "Which one of them do you like best?" "Neither of them. But why do I have two fathers?" None of them were pleasing to the eye. Mo Jingshin did not seem to mind as he calmly said, "It's fine if you don't like it. It's fine as long as you find me pleasing to the eye. Should I know them?" He pursed his lips and said, "You'll understand after you recover. Anything I say now will be memories that you can't digest." "Oh." Jin Wan sat in his arms with a confused expression. "But you all said I was injured. Last night, when I showered, I didn't see any wounds on my body. I touched everywhere, and I didn't bleed. Why did you all say I was injured?" The man's fingers carelessly brushed the soft fur on her sleeves. "The wound has already healed. Of course, it won't bleed anymore. Is my injury very serious?" "It's very serious." "How did I get hurt?" "Why are you injured?" "For me." Hearing his answer, Jin Wan stared at him for a long time, but it seemed that she still couldn't understand the meaning of his words. However, just as she was thinking hard, the man put his hand on the back of her head and gently pressed her closer to his arms. Then she felt warmth on her forehead. The man's kiss fell on her forehead and then gradually moved down to her eyebrows, nose, and finally, when it was about to fall on her lips, he saw that her eyes were confused. She didn't seem to be afraid or aroused. She just didn't seem to understand what he was doing. He paused, not wanting to scare her. He just kissed her lightly on the lips and let her go under her stunned eyes. "Why are you looking at me in a daze?" Jin Wan was confused just now, but now she said with a red face, You were kissing me just now. The man chuckled. Do you know what kissing means? Jinhua nodded, then shook her head, and then nodded again. I know. You're my husband, so you can kiss me. No one else can kiss me. Mo Jingshun smiled at her, pretending to understand. He raised his hand and gently pressed her head. Does your head still hurt? If you don't want the nurse sent by Dr. Qin to massage you, I'll do it for you. Jinwan raised her hand to pull his hand down and shook her head. It doesn't hurt as much as it did a few days ago, but I'm so bored sitting here in a daze every day. The computer, phone, and iPad that Anichin brought me are not good. Rest for a few more days. When the doctor says your condition is stable, I'll take you out to relax, but you must control yourself. Don't be afraid of strangers. As long as you're by my side, trust me, I'll protect you. You don't need to be afraid of anyone, okay? Jinwan hesitated and nodded with some anxiety and yearning. Okay. Mo Jingshan smiled and rubbed her hair. When Mo Jingshan left Jinwan's bedroom, Jinwan picked up the iPad that Annie-chan brought her and watched all kinds of videos and movies. She flipped through them and was curious about everything. The man stayed at home to accompany Jinwan. Dressed in soft gray home clothes, he still looked handsome and cold. Jinwan clicked into a place on the iPad, which was the operation bar of video history. After opening it, she found that there were a lot of things she had seen before. She didn't have a deep impression of them, so she casually scrolled down until she found a video from a long time ago. Seeing Jinwan's name on the video, she clicked in curiously. It turned out that what she saw was the interview she had done in England after she was recognized as a Forbes Chinese female entrepreneur. The woman in the video was herself, dressed in a beautiful professional suit, sitting in the interview hall and talking calmly with the host who spoke English. Jinwan found that she could understand English and could even understand all the content of the interview. For example, the Forbes Chinese female entrepreneur Jinwan, the history of the MN Group's rise, and the Jinwan in the video. Every frown and smile of the Jinwan was charming yet unapproachable, like the self-confidence of a leader of a large company. The Jinwan in the video felt both familiar and strange to her. The female CEO of MN Group? Was this herself? Jinwan put down the iPad after watching the video for more than 40 minutes. She raised her hand and knocked her aching head, but this time she found that her head seemed to be splitting. She immediately raised both hands to cover her head and pressed hard. Chapter 704. Mo Jingshan walked down the stairs. Ji Hongwon and Xiao Zhenjuan hadn't left yet. When they looked back, they saw him coming down. The man's aura at home was clean and cold, and his steady footsteps made the silence in the hall on the first floor even more obvious. Mo Jingshan looked at the two silent people. Haven't you left yet? Is there anything you haven't told us? Ji Hongwon sighed. I'm just thinking. After Wan became so sick, she only recognizes you as her daughter. As a father, I'm still a failure after all these years. After a moment of silence, Ji Hongwon asked, in the 2 days after she woke up, you must have spent a lot of effort to comfort her, right? Looking at her just now, it's hard to imagine what she's like when her emotions aren't stabilized. Annie-chan whispered, when Mrs. Mo woke up that day, she smashed almost everything that could be smashed. Then she hid in the cupboard and refused to let us touch her. Fortunately, Mr. Mo came back in time. Otherwise, we didn't know what to do. Hearing this, Ji Hongwon felt even more sorry and blamed himself. He felt sorry for Jinwan, who was so seriously injured, and blamed himself for not being able to help her. Xiao Zhenjuan closed his eyes and said, back then, when Qing Lin was in a bad state, you were the only one by her side who could accompany her and take care of her. Although you hid my daughter by your side for more than 20 years, I can't deny that you did indeed take good care of her and her mother. Now that Nguyen is in such a state, we can't do anything about it. Just like back then, even if I want to pick up Qing Lin, I'm afraid she wouldn't be willing to leave with me. Ji Hongwon didn't expect that Xiao Zhenjuan, who had been stubborn for so many years and was used to calling the shots in Ling Xiao Group, would say such a thing. And Mo Jingshan didn't interrupt, but said, Annie Chun, ask someone to prepare dinner. I think Chairman Ji and Chairman Xiao finally want to have a chat after more than 20 years. Let them sit down and have a good chat. No, take good care in Wan. If you need any help, come to me at any time. The Xiao family will do our best to help. Xiao Zhenjuan looked a little gloomy, probably because of Jin Wan's rejection and fear, and because he saw Jin Wan like this, he thought of what her mother looked like in the Ji family. It was useless to say anything now, but he didn't mean to make up with the Ji family. After saying this, he turned and walked away with a dark face. Mo Jingshan narrowed his eyes and did not speak. Ji Hongwen didn't stay long. After all, everyone in the Yu Garden was surrounding Jin Wan. He didn't want to cause any trouble, so he said a few words and left with Xiao Zhenjuan. Mo Jingshan indifferently watched as the people left the Yu Garden and turned to head upstairs. In the bedroom, Jin Wan was lying on the bed. Her headache had passed, but she was still looking at the Ji Wan who was being interviewed in the video with a puzzled look. She observed her tone and expression, and from time to time, she smiled and mimicked her facial expressions. Mo Jingshan heard the sound on her iPad outside the door and guessed what she was looking at. He stared at her for a moment to make sure she was looking at her old self and that she was fine. Then he went back to the study, but before returning to the study, he told the servant to keep an eye on her outside the bedroom at all times. In the study, the video conference that had ended not long ago had been interrupted. Mo Jingshan closed the computer and picked up his cell phone to make a phone call. His voice was clear and cold. Close the trading channel of those underground arms dealers. No one related to us can use this channel in the future. Just cut it off and give the important part to Nanhong. The person on the other side of the phone recognized his voice and was very respectful and polite. Mr. Control, are you going to have nothing to do with those underground arms dealers in the future? I haven't been involved in them for so many years. I just know all the channels. Do I look like I'm going to keep them? The person on the other side of the phone was a little surprised. Are you really going to give up the power? Mo Jingshan said indifferently. Do as I say, and you won't suffer any loss. Don't delay. Contact Nanhong directly. He will send someone over. The people of 11 Base know what to do. But we have always trusted you for so many years, and you will never betray us no matter what. Now if these channels are given back to us, it's hard to say whether we won't. Mo Jingshan smiled mildly. I'm sure you don't wish for me to sell you out of impatience one day. Okay, I see. I'll do it right away. After hanging up the phone, Mo Jingshan dialed another number with his long fingers. He put his hand on the computer and looked straight at the bookshelf, not far away with his deep and calm eyes. I'll return the management of 11 Base to you. I don't want it, and you don't have to force me. Just clean up the remnants of the Cambodian gang one by one for me. Otherwise, sooner or later, they will find you, and then I won't be able to go through thick and thin with you. On the other end of the phone was Nan Heng's still lazy and sexy voice. Are you going to concentrate on being the president of Shine Group and stay at home with your wife? Mo Jingshan said indifferently. She is different from Feng Ling. She belongs to your world, but she was forcibly pulled out, while Jin Wan doesn't belong to that world, but she was forcibly pulled in. It's time to call it a day. After a moment of silence, the person on the other side of the phone chuckled. All right, I see. Grandfather Mo's concerns were right. I also know that sooner or later you will return to your nature. The voice on the other side of the phone paused. How is Jin Wan now? She hasn't woken up yet. After all, old Qin is still in High City. He said it won't take long to cure her, so let's leave it to time. Anyway, you're going to focus on accompanying your wife now. She stays by your side obediently and doesn't run around. Unlike me, who can't even be caught. Now she's using all the skills I taught her to take revenge on me. She's becoming more and more cunning. She's like a loach that I can't catch, but she can still bite me. Hearing the voice on the other side of the phone, Nanhong paused and said indifferently, Leave it to me. Just stay with Jin Wan in High City. Bye. Mo Jingshan grunted in response, hung up the phone, and casually put the phone on the table. At this time, Jin Wan was quietly standing at the door of his study. Seeing that he had finished the phone call, she quietly pushed the door open and looked in carefully. When Mo Jingshan noticed her movement and turned to look at her, Their eyes met, and Jinwan immediately blushed in embarrassment. She didn't expect to be discovered so quickly. She pointed to the iPad in her hand, pointed inside, and asked in a low voice, "Shun Shun, can I go in and ask you a question?" Chapter 705. Seeing Jinwan's sneaky and childish look, Imo Jingshan smiled. "What do you want to know?" Jinwan then quietly looked back at the servant who had been following her. Just now, when she came out of the bedroom, the servant had been following her. Because Imo Jingshan had responded inside. After receiving the servant's permission, Jinwan squeezed in through the crack of the door. Now she had lost a lot of weight, so she squeezed in without opening the door too much. This is the person. Jinwan walked over, raised the iPad to him, and tried to show him. "This woman is also called Jinwan. I think she looks exactly like me. So, is this the person I used to be?" Mo Jingshan took the iPad and casually flipped through it. He saw that she had found all the interview videos she had participated in, as well as some of the scenes of her being surrounded by the media in High City, including the time when he had said in front of the media that they had never divorced because of Jimung Ran's trick. She had also dug out the video. She even knew to search for her own name on it. "It's you." The man looked at Jinwan and the iPad for a while, and a warm smile suddenly flashed across his eyes. Then he looked at Jinwan, who was looking at him curiously. "This is you before you got sick." Jinwan nodded repeatedly. "I used to be so beautiful." The man immediately smiled, raised his hand, and gently stroked her hair as if coaxing a child. "You're also very beautiful now." "No, I haven't seen those beautiful clothes. Even the clothes Annie-chan bought for me are not as beautiful as these." Jinwan pointed to herself on the screen and saw all kinds of beautiful clothes. Emo Jingshan paused. Her own clothes should be in Uehu Bay, and most of the clothes in the U Garden were bought by Annie-chan. Many of the clothes were what Jinwan liked 3 years ago. Annie-chan didn't know that Jinwan had changed a lot in the past 3 years in London, and people at Annie-chan's age thought that Jinwan should be comfortable at home, so most of the clothes in the wardrobe were in line with Annie-chan's taste, and many of them were home clothes. "You like these clothes? Shall I take you to buy them tomorrow?" Hearing that she was going out, Jinwan's eyes lit up again, and then she asked, "Are there many people in the clothes shop?" "A lot." Mo Jingshan watched her patiently and gently. "You do need to train in a crowd. If you're always afraid of strangers, I'm afraid you can only stay at home while you recuperate. You can make your own choice." Jinwan hesitated for a long time before timidly whispering, "Will you always accompany me?" "Yes." "Then let's go buy it." Jinwan's eyes were full of expectation, but she was also a little nervous. Her desire to go out and buy beautiful clothes inspired her courage. Besides, Mo Jingshan promised that he would always be with her. She believed him. That night, after Jinwan returned to the bedroom and fell asleep, Mo Jingshan asked the servant to go to Jinwan's home in Uehu Bay to fetch the clothes she liked. Jinwan was still holding the iPad in her sleep. It seemed that since she found herself in it, she had been reluctant to put the iPad down. She even held it in her sleep. Even when the screen was dark, she still wouldn't let it go. She didn't like the feeling of headaches, confusion, and even confusion of memory every day. When she was not grumpy and calm, she longed for memories and a sober and rational self. Cheen Sighting said that when she had this kind of feeling, it meant that everything was going in a good direction. It would be of great help to her recovery if she could always keep a clear head, not be stimulated, and gradually adapt to the current life. Mo Jingshan didn't continue the meeting yesterday. This morning, he would meet with the United States. After all, the time difference between China and the United States was different. He had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning for a meeting, so he woke up early. When he opened his eyes, he saw a fair and delicate face leaning against his chest. Her eyelashes were slender and dense, like a row of small fans. Her long dark hair was spread on the pillow, lazy and beautiful. She was sleeping deeply, defenseless in his arms. The man propped up his elbow and looked at her for a while. Suddenly, a bad impulse flashed across his eyes. He reached out to pinch her nose, leaned over, and kissed her, taking away her breath. Jinwan was naturally woken up by the feeling of suffocation. She had been sleeping in his arms last night, and in the morning, she was still in a deep sleep, so when she opened her eyes, she was a little dazed and didn't know what had happened. When the dazed haze in her eyes faded and she saw the man's smiling black eyes, she realized that he was kissing her again. However, since she woke up, most of the time he kissed her pitifully. At this moment, he kissed her deeply, and she almost couldn't resist. Seeing that Jinwan was innocent and ignorant, but didn't resist because she knew he was his wife, Imo Jingshan admitted that he was impulsive for a moment and his lower body showed his desire for her. But seeing this little woman's innocent look, even if she probably wouldn't resist no matter what he did, he still couldn't bear to do it. After all, her mind was still at the stage of a child, holding back his desires. Imo Jingshan gradually softened his kiss and kissed her gently on the corner of her lips. Jinwan met the man's deep, dark eyes with a smile and heard his low, unhurried voice. "I'm going to the study. You're not allowed to sleep in today. Sleep for at most 2 hours before you get up to clean up. I'll accompany you to buy clothes early. There are fewer people in the morning, so you won't be afraid when there are too many people." Jinwan nodded blankly. When she saw him sit up, she suddenly subconsciously raised her hand to grab his clothes. When he turned his head to look at her, she asked with wide eyes, "Shunshin, did you put something in your pants when you slept? It's so hard. It was especially uncomfortable earlier." The moment Imo Jingshan's expression faltered, Jinwan curiously reached out to touch it. "What did you put in your pants?" For the first time in his life, Imo Jingshan dodged back and retreated under the bed. When he saw the little woman's curious expression, he immediately rubbed his forehead, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Nothing. I'm going to take a shower. You can continue sleeping." "Oh." Jinwan hugged the quilt and curled up on the bed. She continued to look at his pants and seemed a little unhappy. She softly muttered, "You clearly put something in your pants, but you won't let me see." Imo Jingshan. Chapter 706. When Imo Jingshan entered the bathroom, he caught a glimpse of several toiletries placed in front of the bathroom mirror. Last night, he took a shower in the spare bathroom of the study and didn't come back here. He didn't enter the bedroom until Jinwan fell asleep for a long time. He didn't notice that all the toiletries here had been replaced with couple style. Annie-chun had asked for Jinwan's opinion on all her daily necessities. It was probably Jinwan's idea to replace all the toiletries with couple style. When this little woman wasn't being stubborn with him, she was very romantic in her bones. She even knew how to play around with these little things. When she was sober, she lacked this tenacity, but in the past 3 years, she had become more and more stubborn. Even when she was on the verge of death, she would give him a fatal blow and wouldn't stop until he was in pain. Imo Jingshan picked up one of the blue toothbrushes and glanced at the pink one next to it. It seemed that he hadn't taken a vacation for too long. It was a rare vacation in life, and it was rare for him to find a sense of security in this kind of ordinary warmth that he had never felt before. Imo Jingshan spent half a month building up Jinwan's courage. He accompanied her to shopping malls, parks, and amusement parks to familiarize her with all kinds of people. And when Annie-chun went out to buy groceries, he didn't let Annie-chun go, but took Jinwan to the supermarket. In the past half a month, Jinwan hid behind him in fright when she saw strangers outside, and even crouched on the ground with her head in her hands when she saw something familiar outside. She gradually adapted to strangers outside, but she was still used to holding his hand every time. Even in the supermarket, when he pushed the shopping cart with one hand and took something on a shelf with the other, she carefully tugged at his clothes or cuffs. During the weekend, Xiaotian came to the Yew Garden to see Jinwan, but Jinwan ignored her. Obviously, Jinwan was not afraid of her, but she didn't recognize her. When Xiaotian asked Jinwan if she didn't find her familiar, Jinwan's answer was, "Yes, you look very familiar. You look like a bad woman who steals other people's husbands in TV shows. Tell me the truth. Are you going to steal my husband?" Xiaotian was so angry that she almost exploded. Annie-chun explained with a headache, "Miss Xia, please don't mind her. Recently, the way our wife gets familiar with the outside world is to watch movies, TV shows, or some videos. You are too beautiful, so she may have misunderstood. How dare she not recognize me? Xiao angrily tugged at her sleeves. She didn't even plan to stay for dinner in the Yew Garden. She picked up her bag and stormed off, saying as she walked, Jinwan, I'll give you 1 month to wake up. If you don't wake up, I'll take advantage of this time to plot a great scheme to usurp the throne. If I don't put the title of MN Group's legal representative and global regional president on my head, if I don't put your MN Group under my own name, I'll call you Grandma. Andy Chun, the servant, Jinwan didn't understand. She watched as the beautiful woman who didn't look very annoying stormed away. It was quite a while before she turned to ask Annie Chun, why did she call me Grandma? Annie Chun was speechless. It had been about a month and a half since Jinwan woke up. Chin Sighting came to examine her in person every 2 days. In the past, every time she saw a doctor coming to examine her body, she was always afraid and wanted to hide, but since she found how good she used to be on the iPad, she especially hoped that she could recover as soon as possible and remember everything as soon as possible. So she no longer resisted and even cooperated obediently during the brain examination. She would chat with Chin Sighting, and the irritable mood she had at the beginning gradually disappeared. Most of the remaining blood in the brain has been absorbed. It won't be long before she recovers. After examining her, Chin Sighting turned to pack up the various small but very advanced medical testing equipment he brought. I think she's in good condition recently. Didn't you say you were going to take her out for a walk? Let's find a place with good air and calm air to take her for a walk. Basking in the sun is good for the blood absorption of the brain. Now it's winter in High City. It's going to take her to a warm place. Mo Jingshan looked at Jinwan, who was sitting obediently by the bed and listening to them. She had indeed mentioned for a long time that she wanted to go to more places. It seemed that after they got married, the two of them had either been on business trips or she had gone to T-City to study. They had never gone on a simple vacation together during the vacation. 2 years ago, didn't you buy a large island near Argentina? Later, it was transformed into a tourist resort. In the past 2 years, that island seems to be quite popular. I think we should keep the goodies to ourselves. You can take her to the island to relax and go to the beach to bask in the sun. Mo Jingshan looked at Jinwan, who was looking at them expectantly. He curled his lips, and his eyes, which were as deep as an ancient well, slowly revealed a thick smile. You really want to go? Jinwan nodded repeatedly. Yes. The man nodded lightly. Then let's go. Hearing this, Chin Sighting's eyelids twitched. He turned to look at Jinwan, who excitedly threw herself into Mo Jingshan's arms, and then at Mo Jingshan holding Jinwan like an old father. He couldn't help laughing. It's true that you are a wife-doting maniac. Now you don't show any signs of degeneration. Instead, you spoil Jinwan even more. I just made a suggestion, and you agreed to it in less than a minute. You've aroused her curiosity. If I don't agree, do you think she will be disappointed? Mo Jingshan held Jinwan tightly in his arms, lest she accidentally fell in his arms, and slowly put her down on the ground, whispering, "Be careful." Okay, when do I leave? Jinwan blinked at him. When do you want to go? Tomorrow. Jinwan's eyes were full of desire. All right, tomorrow. Mo Jingshan looked at the excitement in her eyes and did not object. Jinwan was so happy that she threw herself into his arms again and kissed Mo Jingshan's face. Mo Jingshan liked her recent undisguised enthusiasm and happiness. Chin Sighting's lips twitched harshly, and he rubbed his forehead. She could even show so much affection to a sick person. She was really a beast. But then again, Jinwan was quite cute like this. Chapter 707. The trip to Argentina was soon settled, and the next day, Jinwan followed Mo Jingshan on the plane. Perhaps it was because the air pressure outside the cabin was too low when they were flying over the Pacific Ocean. Jinwan didn't feel anything on international flights, but this time she had a terrible headache. During the flight, Jinwan rested her head in Mo Jingshan's arms most of the time. When she had a terrible headache, she raised her hand to knock her head. Whenever she did this, Mo Jingshun would hold her hand and gently press her head. Mo Jingshun kept massaging her head until the little woman gradually fell asleep in his arms. His hands didn't stop. Jinwan slept for more than 2 hours. When she woke up, she saw Mo Jingshun and smiled at him. "I just had a dream." Mo Jingshun looked down at her. "What did you dream of?" "I dreamed that you made a lot of cakes for me. There seemed to be 21, and the fireworks on the balcony were very beautiful." Jinwan found a comfortable position and continued to lean in his arms. "Eating cakes is my birthday, right? When is my birthday?" Mo Jingshun's hand gently stroked her cheek and then her hair. Her so-called dream was the time when he helped her celebrate her birthday in T-City. This meant that her confused memories were recovering bit by bit. Her birthday was in winter. On the 4th day in Argentina, it was Jinwan's 25th birthday. "Do you want to eat cake?" Okay. After landing in Argentina, perhaps because Mo Jingshun's obsession from when he was in Jing City failed, even though the island was the territory of Shine Group, he chose a sea view hot spring hotel closest to the seaside. During this season, there were many people on the island, especially the Chinese people who came for a vacation. The hotel that Mo Jingshun had chosen was extremely secluded on the crowded island. Furthermore, the hot spring garden that he had booked was an area that no one else could enter. On the first day in Argentina, Jinwan was very excited about the blue sea, the boundless pool, and the outdoor hot spring under the scorching sun. She put on her swimsuit and swam around in the water. She knew how to swim, but she didn't remember it. At first, she had to use a swimming ring to swim in the water. Later, when she gradually left the swimming ring, she realized that she could actually swim, so she swam back and forth in the water like a fish. Although he had finally satisfied his desire to bring Jinwan to the hot spring hotel, he never expected that he had chosen the wrong time. Back in Jing City, if she had dared to swim in the water in front of him dressed like this, he would not have let her off easily. But now, Jinwan was wearing a white bikini, and her skin was so white that it was almost the color of a bikini. Her long hair swayed behind her like seaweed. Sometimes she went ashore, and sometimes she swam in the water. Mo Jingshun could only order a cup of iced coffee and sit by the side to calm himself. One cup wasn't enough. He ordered another cup with ice. But Jinwan couldn't drink iced coffee. When she was tired from swimming, she came up to him and tried to snatch his coffee. However, Mo Jingshun didn't let her touch the iced coffee. He only called the hotel waitress over to pour her a glass of room temperature juice. Jinwan refused. "I also want to drink iced coffee." "You'll have a stomachache if you drink it." "You can't drink it." Jinwan looked disappointed. "Oh." She reluctantly took the juice from the waitress and took a few sips. Jinwan was unhappy because she didn't drink the iced coffee, and the waitress was very envious of her. At first, she was excited to know that the owner of this island, the big boss of Shine Group, had come in person, and then she was envious of CEO Mo's patience and love for his wife. Although Jinwan looked a little like a spoiled child, she didn't show any strange behavior in front of outsiders, so everyone thought that Mrs. Mo had been spoiled by CEO Mo to be so innocent, lovely, and innocent. CEO Mo, a legendary figure in the business world, usually kept a low profile and rarely showed up. This island in Argentina was a tourism project of Shine Group in the past 2 years. Although this island was very popular recently, no one expected that CEO Mo would come in person with his wife. However, CEO Mo didn't go to various places to visit or check the conditions of the hotels and the environment. He just accompanied his wife to watch the sea view in the hotel, accompanied her to eat her favorite food, or just sat here and watched his wife swim. And it was really bad for women to drink things that were too cold. CEO Mo not only doted on Mrs. Mo, but also took good care of her body and wouldn't let her touch anything cold. Such a good man was almost extinct on the earth, not to mention such a powerful and rich man. There were waiters and waitresses from various countries in this hotel. Because Jinwan often swam, there were 3 or 4 Chinese waitresses sent here to serve them. There were no men. Those who could work here were all young and beautiful, but Mo Jingshun didn't even look at them. Obviously, he only had his wife in his eyes. Mo Jingshin envied him to death but could only watch him eat dog food. It was really torturous. CEO Mo, there's a snack street and a handicraft street near the hotel. These are some of the characteristic streets planned by the island tourist area. It's only a dozen minutes walk from the main entrance of the hotel. Although your wife likes to swim here, I suggest you accompany her to walk on those characteristic streets. There are novelties from different countries. I think your wife will like it very much. The waitress said with a smile as she brought him a new iced coffee. Mo Jingshin's eyes were still on Jinwan, who was sitting by the pool and splashing water with her feet in the water. He didn't move his eyes away at all and asked indifferently, "What's there?" "Everything." When Shine Group planned the scenic area here, it took into account that people from various countries would come here for vacation. So we have almost all kinds of things we can think of. You should have seen these special streets in your subordinates' reports, but you haven't experienced them in person. Why don't you take your wife to visit them this time? Women usually like that kind of place. Mo Jingshin nodded lightly and said no more. Chapter 708. Jinwan was almost addicted to the feeling of swimming in the water. No matter how hard she struggled in the water, she didn't find it tiring. Then she suddenly found that the waitresses near the pool and the outdoor hot spring had all left. She came out of the water, raised her hand to wipe the water off her face, and looked back at the place where Mo Jingshin had been sitting, only to find that Mo Jingshin had also disappeared. She was startled for a moment and then scanned the surroundings. She did not see any trace of Mo Jingshin after looking around for a long time. Jinwan's eyes immediately panicked. She hurriedly swam to the side and was about to go up. All of a sudden, her waist, which was submerged in the pool, tightened, and someone was pulling her down. She instinctively screamed, but before she could finish, she was dragged into the water. In less than a second, she felt suffocated underwater. She hurriedly opened her eyes, only to see that Mo Jingshin, who had been sitting above, had entered the pool at some point. At the moment she froze, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her lips underwater, as if he knew she was suffocating and gave her 2 breaths of air. Jinwan was first startled and then stunned. When she came to herself, the man carried her out of the water because he didn't want her to be too uncomfortable underwater. The moment Jinwan's head came out of the water, her eyes widened. She couldn't say a word. The man swam with her to the edge of the pool, let her lean against the edge, and deepen the kiss. Just as Jinwan gradually relaxed in his arms and instinctively raised her hands to hold his neck and carefully responded, the man suddenly stopped. His dark eyes looked at the passion in her eyes and the innocent look of wanting to cooperate with him. He chuckled and said hoarsely, "Do you know how I feel after watching you swim in the water for a whole day?" Jinwan hadn't extricated herself from the kiss. Because of his words, she looked at him with a blush. "How do you feel?" The man's hand was directly under the water. He took her hand and moved it toward his lower body. Jinwan didn't understand what he was going to do, and then her eyes gradually widened. Finally, she said in surprise, "What did you put in your pants this time? You won't let me see it every time." Because her hand curiously touched around, the man, who had only wanted to tease her, instantly let out a muffled groan. He pressed her firmly against the edge of the pool and abruptly pulled her hand out of the water. Jinwan glared at him. "Stingy. If you have something good, just hide it on you." The man sighed. "You really want to know?" Jinwan nodded very seriously. "Yes, I'll tell you tonight." The man hugged her. After all, he had sat by the side and endured for a day. Even a few cups of iced coffee could not relieve the pain of being able to see, but not eat. At this moment, he held her in his arms, and the woman's soft body obediently let him hold her, as if this could relieve a lot. After hugging her for a long time, Mo Jingshin kissed her earlobe. "You've swum the whole day today. Tomorrow, I'll accompany you out of the hotel. Do you want to go?" "Yes, as long as you accompany me. I can go anywhere." "All right, I'll accompany you." The man lovingly stroked her hair. Jinwan stayed in his arms, raised her head, and kissed his chin. Recently, she often unconsciously liked to take the initiative to kiss him, and every time she did it, Mo Jingshan's heart was comforted. At least when she was inseparable and lacked a sense of security, he could always be by her side. He really couldn't imagine if he was not by her side at this time. But if it were someone else, would she be so dependent on that person? Mo Jingshan rubbed her wet hair again, bent down, and kissed her hairline. The next day, on a characteristic street 10 minutes away from the hotel, Jinwan looked around as if she was curious about everything. However, she held Mo Jingshan's hand the whole time and refused to let go. In 2 days, it would be Jinwan's birthday. Mo Jingshan deliberately looked for a suitable birthday present and had asked someone to make sufficient arrangements. The two of them walked on the street, and whenever Jinwan saw something nice, he would take a few more glances. However, after walking for a while, he found that Jinwan's current situation was that everything she saw was fresh and she liked it. He had planned to see what she liked most now, but the little woman was surprised all the way, as if everything could make her excited. Mo Jingshan asked her everything, and she said she liked it. When he asked her what she liked most, the little woman, who must have watched too many TV shows on the iPad, leaned in his arms, blushed, and whispered, "I like you the most." Mo Jingshan paused, lowered his eyes to look at her deeply, and then he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When they passed by several dessert shops, Jinwan pointed to a milk tea shop and said excitedly that she wanted to drink that. Mo Jingshan turned to buy it for her, and Jinwan finally let go of his hand and turned to look at another shop across the street. It was a cake shop that didn't look very big, but both the brand and the decoration were exquisite and luxurious, and the cake samples on display outside the shop were also very beautiful. Jinwan stared at the beautiful cakes and couldn't help walking over. After entering the cake shop, she saw 2 female customers and several staff in work clothes. On the most conspicuous table in the front was a sky blue cake with 9 layers, on which there were dozens of little swans made of various kinds of sugar-turning techniques and other decorations made of sugar-turning techniques. In short, it was a luxurious, beautiful, and delicious cake. Jinwan stared straight at the cake, walked over, and looked at the vivid little swans on it. She reached out to touch them carefully, but because she knew they were food, she paused when she was about a finger away from them. Then she put down her hand resentfully and didn't dare to touch them. Jinwan stared at the cake with her eyes fixed on it. She looked at the cake with a smile on her face. At this time, a sharp-eyed staff came over. Many people here were Chinese. Seeing that Jinwan was dressed like a Chinese, she came over and pushed Jinwan, who didn't dare to touch the cake, aside. "Hey, miss, this 9-layer cake has been ordered by the 2 beauties next to you, and it's very expensive. Don't touch it." Chapter 709. You'd better not touch it. This is food. You don't know how many germs there are on your hands. If you touch it, the beauty who ordered the cake will be unhappy and return the cake. I'm afraid you can't afford to pay for it. Seeing Jinwan acting so timid and ignorant, the staff member rolled her eyes at her and pushed the trolley with the cake aside. Seeing the staff member acting so cautiously, Jinwan didn't understand the contempt in her eyes and asked instinctively, "Is this very expensive?" The staff turned to look at her again and looked up and down for a while. Seeing that she was obviously not wearing cheap clothes and was dressed very fashionably, but she looked silly, she immediately laughed at her for being so naive. "Of course it's expensive. It took us 3 days and 3 nights to make this cake. Not to mention the carefully made decorations and swans. Even the 9-layer cake embryo is not cheap. The price of the whole cake is 158,000 yuan. I guess you just look at it out of curiosity. You can't afford it in your life." Jinwan had no concept of money. When she heard 158,000 yuan, she nodded confusedly. Oh, in her mind, cake should be very delicious. But how much was 158,000 yuan? It didn't seem to be much, right? Because Shunshin brought her food, necessities, and the hotel she stayed in. Although she didn't see Shunshin pay with a credit card like others, she saw that the prices of many places were 6 or 7 digits. Now, she heard him say 158,000 yuan so proudly. So it must be a lot of money, right? Are you scared? Seeing Jinwan's dumbfounded expression, the staff member snorted smugly. If you want to eat cake, go to the cake shop diagonally across the street to buy it. Most of them are thousands of yuan, and the cheapest ones are 2 or 300 yuan. Our shop sells all the high-grade sugar cakes and all the high-end styles in advance. Any cake is 6 digits. You can't afford it. Just take a look and leave. But you could just take a look, but don't touch it. These cakes are very expensive. If you break one, I won't be able to explain it to you. Jinwan nodded obediently and did not speak anymore. She thought about it and felt that it might be really expensive. She had better not let Shunshin spend money on her, so she turned to leave. Seeing her like this, the staff snorted and continued to work, not planning to pay any more attention to her. However, just as Jinwan was about to walk out of the door, a very fashionably dressed beauty came in. The beauty was holding a bag in her hand and walked in at a fast speed. She was in such a hurry that she directly bumped into Jinwan. Jinwan's head couldn't stand the violent impact, nor could it stand the shaking after being hit. Her head hurt, and she couldn't stand firmly. She subconsciously put her hand on the table frame to support herself. She was about to turn around when she suddenly heard a loud curse behind her. "Are you blind? Why are you standing here and blocking the way?" Jinwan jerked back to look at the woman. The woman paused and stared at Jinwan in shock for a long time. Jinwan? Jinwan was a little angry because this woman didn't apologize for bumping into her and was so rude to her. She didn't expect that the woman knew her name and immediately looked at her again. This woman was Yi. She used to be a socialite in High City, but her family moved to Argentina when she was 15 or 16. When they were children, Yi and Ji Mingran had a good relationship. Although Ji Mingran didn't show any obvious rift between her and Jinwan, Yi liked to exclude Jinwan and even often mocked her since they were children. Jinwan didn't recognize her and didn't remember those things. Even if she was sober now, she might not be able to recall these unimportant memories immediately. Seeing that Jinwan seemed to be in a daze, Yi thought she was just too surprised, so she immediately walked over and looked her up and down. "Long time no see, Jinwan. If I hadn't seen you here today, I would have almost forgotten that there is a person like you in this world. I haven't asked about the social circle in High City for many years. How are you? How is Ji Mingran? I haven't contacted you and your sister for many years." Jinwan didn't know this woman and said truthfully, "I don't know you." Yi paused, and the contempt in her eyes suddenly turned into anger. She had said that she had almost forgotten Jinwan's existence on purpose, but Jinwan looked as if she really didn't remember her, as if she had completely ignored her. After all, she was one of her childhood playmates. How could she forget her just like that? She did it on purpose, didn't she? Yi sneered. "It's fine if you don't know me. I don't care if you know me or not. A few years ago, I spoke to Ji Mingran on the phone. I heard that you seemed to be married, but she didn't say who you married. I didn't have time to contact you later. I don't know who married you, Miss Ji. I'm really curious." Jinwan didn't understand what she said and didn't have any impression of the name she mentioned. She just felt a headache and turned to go out to find Mo Jingshin. Yi thought that Jinwan didn't want to talk about her marriage, so she instinctively suspected that Jinwan was divorced or had an unhappy marriage, so she didn't want to talk about it. So she said sharply, "Tut, the eldest daughter of the Ji family seems to be living a miserable life. Alas, don't be too sad. There are many people who are unhappy in their marriages. Just make do with it. Anyway, life is only a few decades, and it doesn't matter whether you feel wronged or not." With that, she said with a smile, "But I'm different. My husband is the eldest son of a political family in Argentina, and now he is the general manager of this island resort. My marriage is very happy." At this time, the staff of the cake shop suddenly came over and said fawningly, "Missy, do you know this lady? She seems to come in to see the cake. Just now, she almost touched the cake you ordered. After I told her the price, she was shocked." Yi looked at Jinwan with a faint smile. "Shocked? Is it necessary? Has the G Corporation declined so much that Miss G can't even afford a cake worth more than 100,000 yuan?" Chapter 710. Don't say that. She has been good at pretending to be stupid since she was a child. No one can find fault with her, but in fact, she is very cunning, E said as her eyes fell on Jean Wan's clothes again. No matter how unhappy your marriage is, you still have to live, don't you? But seeing that you still have the capital to be young and beautiful, if you really can't live with your current husband, I can introduce you to some rich men. But most of these men are not young, and they all have wives and children. They just like to come out to play. They can give you a lot of money to sleep with them. Do you want to meet them? Jean Wan seemed to have completely blocked out her words. She raised her hand and pressed her forehead with a headache. Seeing her so stubborn, Yi's words seemed to have hit cotton. She clearly remembered that although Jean Wan didn't seem to have any personality in the past, in fact, she refused to suffer any losses. Otherwise, how could the Ji family's eldest daughter's arrogant and domineering personality have spread? And Jean Wan was also very mean. However, her current expression made Yi feel strange, and she was also unhappy about being ignored. At this time, the two female customers who had been inside came up to Yi. "Cousin, we've finished the order for the cake. Do you need us to buy other things for you?" "No, you can go back first." "Oh, by the way, ask my husband to come over," Yi said in a sweet voice. The two beauties nodded and left. Jean Wan also wanted to leave, but Yi took her arm and didn't let her go. When Jean Wan was impatient, a very tall man came in. The man had black hair, black eyes, and a fashionable beard, but he looked like a Westerner. He was an Argentinian. Honey, seeing the man come in, Yi immediately let go of Jean Wan's hand, turned to the man at the door, and hugged him intimately. Then she turned to Jean Wan and said, "Let me introduce her to you. Her name is Jean Wan. We grew up together when we were in High City." The man looked at Jean Wan expressionlessly and held Yi in his arms. "Honey, I thought you wanted me to help you get the cake. What's the point of introducing a childhood friend like you? As for the cake, the staff here will be responsible for delivering it. Is the matter here settled? Shall we go back now?" "Great. Wait a minute. I have something to do," Yi said intimately as she turned around to speak to the staff. The staff nodded and immediately said to Jean Wan, who was having a headache, "Don't block the way. We're going to ship the cake out. Don't delay our business. If Missy Yi's cake can't be delivered on time, you'll have to compensate us for our lost time," Jean Wan said with a smile. Jean Wan felt that these people were very strange. Their words were all strange. Although she couldn't understand them, she felt strangely uncomfortable. She turned to look at the door. When she saw the figure outside, she felt a lot more at ease. She wanted to laugh, but couldn't, so she forced a smile. Yi didn't look at Jean Wan's face, so she didn't notice the expression on Jean Wan's face. There was no deep hatred between them. She just wanted to bully Jean Wan verbally and show off her husband to show her how good she was now. After all, when she was a child, her family was not as rich as the Ji family. Although she had a good relationship with Ji Men Gran, she was still inferior to them in front of the Ji family, which was a psychological shadow. She finally won a round on this island after so many years, and now she was really happy. "Honey, let's go." After showing off, Yi put her arm around the man's arm, and the two of them turned around intimately to go out. However, at the moment they turned around, Yi's husband froze and looked at the man who had been standing outside the door for a long time. At first, he didn't dare to recognize him, but after a few seconds, his expression changed. "CEO, M.O.?" Yi was startled when she heard the way he addressed her, but she quickly understood what was going on. Her husband was sent by Argentina to take charge of this island, but the real boss of this island was CEO, M.O., the big boss of Shine Group. The man who could make her husband call him in such a cautious and surprised way must be the legendary boss Missouri, M.O. Jingshin. Yi hurriedly put on a polite smile. "Hello, CEO, M.O." M.O. Jingshin's face was expressionless. With his back to the people on the street, his body seemed to be condensed into a layer of cold, emotionless ice, and his frost-like eyes fell on them. Being stared at by his eyes, Yi's legs softened, and she subconsciously looked at her husband. However, when her husband also didn't understand what was going on, M.O. Jingshin's cold eyes passed them and looked at Jean Wan. "Which cake do you like?" Jinwan pursed her lips and didn't speak. She knew she was sick and confused. She didn't want to cause trouble for Shanshin, so she just shook her head quietly and didn't say anything. However, when Mo Jingshin spoke to Jinwan in a very patient tone, not only the staff in the cake shop, but also Yi and her husband were stunned. The air in the cake shop seemed to freeze in an instant. "CEO Mo," Yi's husband said tentatively and cautiously. Yi didn't understand what was going on. Mo Jingshin had completely ignored them and walked in. When he brushed past them, Yi couldn't help shivering because of his cold aura. She looked at her husband for help and asked in a low voice, "What's going on? Why is CEO Mo here?" The point was, why did he seem to be familiar with Jinwan? A woman's sixth sense gave her a very bad feeling. Could it be? Mo Jingshin walked up to Jinwan, looked at her who seemed to be aggrieved, but didn't want to say anything, raised his hand and stroked her head comfortingly. "I helped you line up to buy milk tea, but then I couldn't see you. Which cake do you like?" "In." Jinwan raised her hand and pointed to the 9-layer blue cake behind her. "I just thought it looked good, so I came in to take a look, but they said it was very expensive and I couldn't afford it." "Is that so?" Mo Jingshun didn't get angry, but looked at the staff with a smile. His smile seemed to be cold. Dash. Chapter 711. When he turned around and saw Mo Jingshin gently holding Jinwan in his arms, her eyelids twitched hard, and she had a feeling that she was about to die. The employees of the cake shop didn't understand what was going on. At this time, the manager of the cake shop came down from the production room on the second floor. The moment he saw Mo Jingshin, he was shocked. He had heard the noise downstairs and thought someone had come in to make trouble. He didn't come down to see what had happened, but he knew what had happened. Now that she saw Mo Jingshin here and how much he cared about the little woman in front of him, the manager staggered down the stairs and hurriedly came over to apologize. "CEO, Mo, it's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. It's our employees' fault. They're used to interacting with foreigners and have become careless and careless. It's all our fault for not managing them well." Mo Jingshin coldly glanced at Jinwan again. Jinwan didn't understand why these people suddenly changed their attitudes, so she stood in front of him in a daze and didn't speak. "CEO Mo, are you here to inspect the island project? Or do you have any other activities arranged? Why didn't you inform us in advance? We could have arranged it, but you..." Yi's husband also felt that something was wrong, so he came up and spoke politely and ingratiatingly. Seeing that her husband was being coldly ignored, Yi thought for a moment and moved closer to Mo Ting. She said carefully, "President Mo, it's rare for you to visit an island in Argentina. This unique street is meant for tourists. Why don't we invite you to a quieter place? The people here are all messy and not suitable for you." Mo Jingshin coldly glanced at her. "Who are you?" As soon as Yi saw the coldness in his eyes, her heart couldn't help trembling. She raised her hand to take her husband's arm, saying, "I'm his wife, but I lived in High City for more than 10 years when I was a child. I've heard of the Mo family's name, and then I've heard of you, CEO Mo." Seeing the coldness in Mo Jingshin's eyes that could almost penetrate people's hearts, Yi saw Jinwan's dazed look in front of Mo Jingshin and felt that although they seemed to be very familiar with each other, she thought that maybe they just knew each other and met here by chance. They shouldn't have a deep relationship. Therefore, Yi took the opportunity to add, "But CEO Mo, when I lived in High City, I knew what kind of person Miss G was. She's not a good person. It's better if you don't interact with her. I heard she's the illegitimate daughter of the G family." "Heard?" Mo Jingshin's smile was cold, but his eyes were so dark that no one could see through them. He sneered. "Did she offend you?" Seeing that CEO Mo was talking to her, Yi instinctively felt that her lucky guess was probably right. There should be no relationship between him and Jinwan. She hurriedly turned around and pointed to the 9-layer blue cake that had not been wrapped up by the shop assistant. "In fact, I didn't offend her. It's just that I had ordered this cake in advance and planned to give it to my husband's great-grandmother. She's already 90 years old, and we specially ordered a 9-layer cake. But Jinwan was so ungrateful that she insisted on touching it. How can food be touched? If she touched it, would other people eat it? The shop assistant scolded her, but she didn't seem to be convinced. She kept coming back and forth, making others think there might be a dispute here, but in fact, it's not. Before Yi finished her long speech, Jinwan whispered in a voice that only he could hear, "I didn't touch it. I know it's for people to eat. I just came over to have a look out of curiosity, but I withdrew my hand before I touched it. I didn't touch it." However, before Yi finished her rambling, Imo Jingshun glanced indifferently at the 9-layer cake not far behind Jinwan. Because there were too many layers, it had to be carefully placed on the cart. Otherwise, it would easily collapse or shift, which would affect the appearance of the cake. He glanced at the bottom of the cake, which was fixed by a round plate on the cart, and then at Jinwan. The little woman was very aggrieved, but she didn't show it on her face. Obviously, her good mood for shopping today was affected. "The cake is well made. Push it over and let me have a look." The man's emotionless voice rang. The clerk of the cake shop paused and didn't know whether to push the cart over or not, but the person in charge of the shop who had just run downstairs did not dare to be negligent at all. He hurriedly pushed the cart to Mo Jingshin and said with a big smile, "COMO, in fact, our desserts and cakes are also very special on this special street. Although they are expensive for a reason. Many of our dessert-making techniques are new, and we make whatever is popular. And look at the technique of turning the sugar. Ordinary cake shops can't make such a lifelike effect." However, as soon as the manager finished speaking, Mo Jingshin raised his long leg and kicked the cart expressionlessly. The 9-layer cake of more than 2 meters immediately fell to one side. In the end, the cake, along with all the cream and sugar decorations on it, fell to the ground, and the cart hit the wall not far away as if it had lost its balance, making a deafening sound. In an instant, the entire cake shop was silent. Yi raised her head in shock to look at Mo Jingshin's bone-chilling gaze. CEO Mo? As if he finally saw the danger in his eyes, Yi's husband stood there in disbelief. Even though the 9-layer cake had fallen to the ground and the cream on the ground looked dirty, he didn't dare to say a word. "Who gave you the courage to show off your superiority in front of my wife?" Mo Jingshin's voice sounded careless, but in fact, it was frighteningly cold. Yi's face trembled, and so did her husband's. Yi stiffened as she looked at the coldness in Mo Jingshin's eyes. As if finally realizing something, she jerked her head to look at Ji Nuan, who was still standing there with an indifferent expression, and no one could tell what she was thinking. How could it be? Yi was so nervous that her palms were cold. "COMO, what did you say? Did I hear it wrong? What, your wife?" She even began to stutter when she spoke, praying from the bottom of her heart that she had heard wrongly. Chapter 712. Mo Jingshin didn't reply to her, but raised his eyebrows expressionlessly and looked at her coldly. "How does it feel to smash a cake?" Yi didn't dare to raise her head guiltily. She didn't know what to say and could only reluctantly answer. It's fine, as long as Mo is happy." Mo Jingshin chuckled. "I'm happy. Yes, as long as Mo is happy." Yi nodded incoherently. "If you want to make me happy, you have to pay a certain price." Hearing the coldness in Mo Jingshin's cold voice that only she could feel, he didn't know how she had offended a god like him and didn't know what to do at all. She was even more flustered. Was Jinwan really his wife? All of a sudden, Mo Jingshin pointed to the nearest 7-layer cake in the window and signaled the shop assistant with his eyes to push the cake over to her. Yi's eyes froze, and she looked up at Mo Jingshin. "Smash it!" Mo Jingshin spat out these cold words, and his eyes were cold without any warmth. Yi trembled all over. This. Even though Mo Jingshin was sneering, his smile was still bewitching. "Didn't you say that as long as I'm happy? But this smash it!" Mo Jingshin didn't give her a chance to say another word and stared at her coldly like a knife. Yi was stunned, but she didn't dare to be careless under his icy gaze. She reached out and picked up the 7-layer cake, which was very heavy. Because of this action, she got cream all over her body, but she didn't dare to say a word. After a few seconds of hesitation, She gritted her teeth and threw the entire cake to the ground. The two giant cakes fell to the ground, and the cream and cake spread out in a mess. The sweet smell of cream in the air didn't make people feel the slightest sweetness. They only felt the silent smoke of gunpowder approaching. Seeing the broken cake on the ground, the shop assistants didn't dare to speak, and E's husband didn't dare to say anything. He didn't even dare to say a word to defend Jean Wan. The noise attracted the attention of passers-by, and many people began to watch from outside. Continue. Mo Jingshan's voice was clear and cold. His gaze mildly glanced at the dozens of cakes in the shop, large and small. Many of them were reserved for today, and some were new samples made a few days ago. The employees saw Mo Jingshan's gaze and guessed what he meant, but no one dared to speak, much less step forward to stop the development of the situation. At first, these employees didn't know who CEO Mo was, but since the person in charge of the store was so respectful to him, it was obvious that he was the owner of this island. It was said that the owner of this island had the surname Mo, so it should be him without a doubt. Who would dare to provoke this great god? They simply didn't want to live in Argentina and this island where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. CEO, Mo, this one should be enough, this. Mo Jingshan ignored her words and coldly glanced at her face. Do you want to smash it, or do you want me to ask your husband to smash it? E trembled all over. If her husband was involved, it wouldn't be easy. After all, Mo Jingshan was the owner of this island, and her husband was the general manager of this island authorized by Shine Group. If this big boss was provoked, her husband would probably. Then the loss would not be as simple as just a cake. She hurriedly turned to pick up the other two small cakes in the window and smashed them hard on the ground. More and more people gathered outside the shop, pointing at E, who was smashing the cakes. She had been domineering on this island with her husband for several years, and many businessmen were unhappy with her. Now that they saw her smashing the cakes, they couldn't help talking about her, thinking that she was crazy, and more people came to watch the fun. Continue. Mo Jingshan's voice was still cold, but as he spoke, he glanced at Jean Wan, who had been silent. E's eyes were red, but she didn't dare to delay and smashed the cakes one by one. Seeing Mo Jingshan's expression, the shop assistant didn't dare to be negligent and took the initiative to carry the cakes far away from her over one by one for her to smash. The cream and cakes by E's feet were almost piled up into a mountain. She was in a mess, and a lot of cream was stuck to her body, so she turned to pick up other cakes and smash them. Finally, all the cakes in the shop were smashed, and the floor was covered with cream. It was a messy scene that couldn't be cleaned up. E just thought she could breathe a sigh of relief when Mo Jingshan suddenly looked coldly at the shop assistant hiding by the side and said coldly, "Bring all the finished and unfinished cakes in your production room." The shop assistant looked surprised, and so did E. But seeing Mo Jingshan's eyes, the shop assistant instinctively rushed upstairs to fetch them. The onlookers outside the shop had almost completely blocked the entrance. Jinwan stood in front of Mo Jingshan and watched this scene. Many strange images of Mo Jingshan appeared in her mind. It seemed that this man often supported her like this and protected her all the time. She paused for a moment, then turned to look at E, whose face was as white as a sheet. Jinwan didn't really understand the current situation, but she felt inexplicably good from the bottom of her heart. She was especially happy, and all the unhappiness in her heart seemed to have disappeared. She raised her hand and gently tugged on Mo Jingshan's sleeve, whispering, "Shun Shun, I don't want to stay here anymore." At this time, the shop assistant brought down the cakes and desserts from the production room. Seeing Jean Wan coquettishly and relying on Mo Jingshan, E's face stiffened, and when she saw the desserts that had been brought down, her face turned pale. "What are you doing here? Give it to her. Keep smashing." Mo Jingshan held Jean Wan in his arms and gently patted her shoulder comfortingly as he spoke coldly and indifferently. "CEO Mo, can I stop smashing? There's no more cake on the floor." E's eyes were red, and she wanted to beg for mercy. "Don't you like this cake shop very much? Aren't you very proud?" Mo Jingshan said unhurriedly and coldly, "You feel sorry for smashing a few cakes? No, COMO, I have to remind you that all the cakes smashed today will be under your name. E's legs immediately weakened, and she almost fell to the ground, but the ground was covered with cream. She hurriedly raised her hand to support herself on the table by the side and barely managed to stand. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.